There's Vanessa.
Yep, welcome everyone to today's meeting, Tuesday the 29th of July. Nice to have us all back. You know, we've had so-called quiet July, but it's nice to bring us all back together and do some of the work for the district that we serve. So welcome. Health and safety. We are aware of how we should exit this building in the event of an emergency, and our assembly point is not altered over by the St John's rooms. I have received an apology for lateness this morning from Vince. So can someone please move and second? Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Fiona, that we receive an apology for lateness from Vince. He's been held up in a line of traffic. There's been a nasty accident up his way this morning. So all in agreement that we receive that apology for lateness, please say aye. Aye. As against, that's carried. Thank you. Welcome, Vanessa, online. We've got you here for the day on coming in via remote, so it's good to have you here. And otherwise, we have got, when we get Vince, we've got full attendance. So we will start our meeting in our usual manner, and the affirmation gives us all the chance to leave the business of our private lives behind and focus on the work that we have in front of us in regard to the Hiranui district. So we will pledge that we will faithfully and impartially use our skills, wisdom and judgment throughout the discussions and deliberations ahead of us today in order to make responsible and appropriate decisions for the benefit of the Hiranui district at large. We commit individually and as council to the principles of integrity and respect, and to upholding the values that we believe distinguish and enrich our district. Thank you. You've all read the agenda in front of us today, and we have got, I'll receive if there is any conflict of interest declarations to be noted in today's agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, just to note an ongoing conflict of interest, Maskell's Road, 5.4 in the open and 8.6 in here.
So you won't take part in any of that discussion. Thank you. Everybody else good to go? Thank you. And normal procedure, we are being live streamed and this meeting is being recorded. Thank you, Graham. Thank you. Just to make certain that we have got the information required for today's meeting, you will have all received from Dan a letter from the Maskell's in regard to Maskell's Road. So just a shared nod so that you've all received that letter. Thank you. And we'll discuss that when we have that paper in front of us. And also in regard to the public excluded 8.5, you have received some additional information that was circulated by the CEO. So you've all got that information. Thank you. That's great. So councillors, we can move on. We've got two sets of minutes to work through. First is our council meeting for the 24th of June. If I may just do a quick page turn for looking for accuracy, page 4 and 5. Sorry.
Just a quick correction to the in attendance. The Chief Strategy and Community Officer wasn't in attendance at meetings.
Okay,
that's just a correction.
That's fine. We will put that one. Thank you. Page 6 and 7. Page 8 and 9. 10 and 11. 13. 14 and 15. 16 and 17, 18 and 19, and page 20. So if there's no other matters of accuracy in regard to those minutes, someone like to move that we receive those minutes as true and accurate. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Pauline. All in agreement with that slight alteration, all in agreement that we receive those minutes as true and accurate, please say aye. Aye. Okay. It's carried, thank you. So just likewise, we'll do a quick page turn to see if there's any matters arising from those minutes. Anything on page 4 and 5? you. I'll go with Pauline and then Robbie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the chair, just a question for the CEO, just in regards to page 5, and the potential government funding towards the Amberley Beach Fund and associated projects. I know you've been attempting to have a formal meeting with Minister Watson, so just wondered if there was any progress on that.
No, there is no progress. In fact, well, I suppose you could call progress, but I've had an email from Mr. Watt's office saying he's not available for a meeting.
Robbie?
Page 5, this doesn't appear to be later on. Just, is there any update on Conference Road with the golf club?
Yes, golf club, they're working through their design and pricing and when that's available.
Anything else, councillors? Just in regard to the regional deal process, sent emails and update of that. I'm happy to give further update, but we could do that in the Herald Diary if there's any, excuse me, of any interest. So I'm happy to do that then. That gives a further update to just keep you ahead of that. Thank you. Page 6 and 7. Yeah, I think that's, yeah. Page 8 and 9. 10, 11. 12, 13. 14, 15. 16 and 17. Page 18 and 19. Just as by way of update, it's in regard to the deputation. I circulated a letter that I provided to councillors, so by way of response. And page 20. The matters arising in those set of minutes. Thanks, councillors. We'll move on to page 21, and that's for the temporary road closure. Councillor Brewerton and McPherson sat on that committee. So I'm just seeking from any matters arising, any corrections in those set of minutes, Robbie or Vanessa? No, happy with that, Vanessa? Yep, thank you. That being the case, I'm happy to move. Either one of you happy to second that we receive those minutes as true and accurate? Thank you, Robbie. All in agreement with that, please say aye. Thank you. Matters arising from those minutes, I guess I can speak on behalf of this group that that event that we were determining at that temporary road closure meeting didn't go ahead because the weather conditions and the roading, the consideration of the road by the organisers, and we've just had a subsequent temporary road closure meeting because of a postponement date that was offered in conjunction with the organisers, the adjacent landowners and the community. And so we've just looked at that now as an alternate date, which is 18th of October. 18th of October. So yeah, so it'll come back in front of you at that next one to review. So that's where that's at. So there's no further matters arising to that. So if we can just look at the forward programme on page 23, I guess that will be populated this side of the election and then beyond that as well. Hamish, have you got anything else to add there?
No, Madam Mayor, we only really put significant items on there, and I guess we should have signalled the local water done well stuff that's coming through, but other than that.
Right, but it probably would be, I mean, local water done well will be part of all of those agenda items as we progress.
Oh, man, yes, there will be a report attached to the 5 August meeting next
Okay.
on local.
Okay.
So even though it's a presentations meeting, we will have a report to you as well.
Okay.
And we do have quite a number of presentations.
Okay, so next week's looking to be quite a yeah, okay. All right, everybody comfortable with that? Thank you. That's fine. Then that looks at the Herald Diary, and I just, if I can give you a wee moment there as far as the regional deals, just so that it keeps ahead of councillors. I sent that report out, but so the regional deal is really looking at Waitaha Canterbury Pathway to Success. So that's the document that's being looked at the moment. Its purpose is to lay a foundation for long-term regional propositions. And it's based on the Canterbury Mayoral Forum priorities for collaboration and investment across the region. Those priorities include transport, housing, energy and infrastructure. And of course, they do expand into other critical areas around food and fibre, tourism, attracting skilled workforce, employment, technology and innovation. So that's the development of this document is being done in collaboration with Canterbury Mayoral Forum, Business Canterbury, private partnership as well, private businesses. So to look at how we can put a deal in front of the government, which is, excuse me, the coalition government's consideration of an enduring project that is going to uplift the prosperity of the region. And so it really is, sorry, I've got it here, purpose to establish a long-term agreement between local and central government to unlock funding and resources for improvement to the region. It's a 30-year vision, a 10-year strategic plan, and it relies on existing resources. And part of the impact of this strategy is using some of the work that we've done, you know, the energy inventory that we did, you know, what are we doing as a council, what is every other council doing to manage a greener world, and the regional housing plan, you know, how can we build houses faster so we're, you know, how can we get better housing stock for our communities to live in to increase that prosperity. So that's the overarching view of this regional deal for Canterbury. It's not, there is still a long way to go to actually get that into a consolidated form to present to government, but this is what the Canterbury Mayoral Forum is doing. So some districts have already put in a regional deal, but we wanted, or Canterbury wanted to take its time, get something that was deliverable and actually achievable and outcome focused for the region. So that's where that sits at the moment. So it feels like it's a good pathway for us all to be in. Do you want to add anything more to that?
Just, I mean, you would have read in the government's currently negotiating 3 regional deals with 3 regions or sub-regions, and they have said that there will be a second round of regional deals, but they haven't said when. And given that, I mean, the negotiation process will take a while, and then the implementation process will take a while. You can make up your own mind as to whether that'll be before or after the government elections.
And the other thing is, sorry, that a paper will come to, I think it's proposed to Mayoral Forum first in August, and then it will come to each council to understand the detail of what that regional deal looked like. So it will be a presentation to probably likely a new council around that. So Mayoral Forum's 22nd of August, I think, somewhere there, and then it will come through. So it's a regional focus, but it seems like this is you know, proposing to give a increased prosperity across the whole Canterbury region. So
and that will not cover the regional deal. That will cover the foundations that it's being built on to you know, just make sure that we're all aligned on those foundations, because the deal itself will be quite a detailed business case.
Okay, happy with that. Thanks, Pauline.
Yeah, I really appreciate that update, thank you, and understanding the timelines and the process. Are you involved in that through
Well, the chair of Environment Canterbury sits at Canterbury Mayoral Forum, and so there's a small working group. It's chaired by Mayor Nigel Bowen from Timaru. Chair Pauling sits on that working group. Myself, Mayor Gordon, who else?
Craig.
I beg your pardon, here, Dion Swiggs, he sat in for Craig Pauling, so he's the deputy chair. Leanne Watson has sat in on that, she's Business Canterbury. And then we have support from Environment Canterbury officers, so Marie McNally, she's the secretariat, Jessie Burgess is part of the working group, and Sam Bellamy, but they're both officers at Environment Canterbury. So there is, Sam Gordon, sorry, he's also sits on that working group. So yeah, it initially came through the Canterbury Mayoral Forum process. So yeah, and a working group was formed to kind of hone in, I guess, and work on behalf of the entire forum. So it's reporting back to the forum, but we want the information to come to communities like ours.
Yeah, thank you, fantastic.
Probably question.
Yeah, I understand it's a regional deal, which will cover several districts. Under, say, infrastructure, how far does that drill down in things like water storage? Is that something that there's a benefit or halfway through regional deals, or is that something a separate function?
I mean, it would be fair to say that it has been discussed at that working group. You know, what exactly is a regional deal? What will bring prosperity across the district? Water storage is definitely part of that infrastructure. It sits under that infrastructure category because that actually brings skilled workforce. It needs more housing. So you know there are details around that infrastructure that will meet the objectives, I guess, of the regional deal. But it hasn't really drilled down. But I'm certainly keeping that inside that working group's attention. Thank you. Okay. Any further questions? Are you all happy? Yep.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just not regarding what you could talk about, but just I'd like to acknowledge your presence at the Life of Fire Brigade on the 5th of July. And I know you're a busy lady, but for you to come all the way up to Mount Iford, and it was our first honours night, and we've been going for 11 years, and have the Mayor there. It was great to have you there, so thank you for that.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you for that. But you know, they're right across the district. Fire Brigade Honours Nights are an incredible way to actually acknowledge the people that when the siren goes, it's in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night, their call to attention is there to protect our community. So it's a pleasure to be invited to those events, but thank you for those kind words. Any other questions? Rightio, let's move on. Okay, councillors, so we've got some decision items in front of us today. The only time that we need to, or the time that we need to work to is at 1 PM. We have, we will receive the update from the Hammer Springs Thermal Pools and Spa. Sarah will be coming in via Zoom to that. And so she can, we'll just juggle the agenda to best suit how we manage this whole process. But we're looking to we need to meet, that's our one deadline that we need to meet, and run around, have a bit of a chat, and we'll make it work between here and there, and then whatever we say. Okay, happy with that? Let's move on. Welcome, Claire. It's lovely to see you here. And this is your paper in regard to the commitment agreement with our neighbours to the north in Kaikoura. So perhaps if you just take us through this paper. I think it's been really well presented, and I understand the intent of this paper, but let's hear from you and then we'll take some questions. How would that be?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Wonderful, thank you.
So, as Madam Mayor has said, that this is looking at entering into a commitment agreement with Kaikoura District Council. The agreement is based on a template prepared by the Department of Internal Affairs and provided to everybody who's considering an arrangement of this type. It sets out the way we're expecting to work together as we put together the Water Services Council controlled organisation. So it's a relatively short-term contract, and it is been legally reviewed by Double Finley. It indicates in this paper also what the expected budget is for the proposed work together of $870,000, of which we already have available $437,500, including $250,000 which we've recently received from the Department of Internal Affairs. for this purpose. In terms of the difference, it's expected that the associated wet debt will transfer to the Water Services Organisation in due course. It's also proposed that we approve terms of reference for a reference group. Having regard to the elections, it's proposed that we don't appoint councillors to this group until after the election process. And as mentioned already, it is proposed that the Water Services Delivery Plan will come to the meeting next week for consideration. Any questions?
Thanks, Chair. Is there any questions for Claire in regard to the commitment agreement or the reason why? So I'll start with you, Tom. Thank you, and then go to you, Robbie.
Thanks. Morning, Claire. Thank you very much. I found this report really readable. Thank you very much. I was concerned under the commitment agreement. There is in the circular bullet points matters which the shareholders will be required to approve, and it states decision to issue, sell, or repurchase water organisation shares. Can you give us a little bit more of an explanation of that? Because I am concerned that shares, the sale or disposal of shares, might be outside the council, and that would change my opinion on this agreement completely.
Okay, there are very strict rules about what can happen with things in the Act. So this isn't an avenue to privatisation because that is specifically covered in the Act. The idea is that if you're doing something like this, you're working with another organisation, another water organisation, to do some sort of arrangement. So, for example, if we were to find in future times another partner, that might be the type of thing that might trigger this.
And that partner would not be private industry.
No, this is not privatisation.
It is not
It is
privatisation.
not privatisation. There are very strict rules in the Act about who and what you can do together.
So can I just be clear, just to expand on that? So what we're talking about here is that if our Wisco then had a commitment for another council to join us, or that's what we're talking about, is about further progress to draw out more on what Tom's you're securing in your own mind, that actually it's not about the privatisation, it's
Yes.
about the opportunity to work with other councils.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
okay.
either us joining them or them joining us, either
Yeah.
way would have something to do with this.
Yeah, it was just that statement there, as it says, to
Yeah.
issue, sell, or repurchase shares on its own without that explanation does sort of indicate that we might ultimately or one day go down that path of privatisation or partial privatisation.
It's not permitted.
Thank you.
Not commitment. Yeah, thank you. Great question though. Good starter question. So I've got Robbie here now. Thanks, Robbie.
Yeah, that was my number one question, and further discussion, I think I'd almost like to see in the minutes an explanation, because this was a deal breaker across the country with even the population. So probably if this was looked at in 10 years' time, it'd be nice to have that clarified. The other comment was Uncle Finlay, presumably there was no comment.
What page you on, just so we can.
Page 27 still.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Just nothing further from Idle Finlay. No comments, nothing. Obviously, it was all particularly moved.
Any comments they had have been incorporated,
Yeah.
and they're relatively small in nature. It's like, you know, that we didn't need so much detail about something given there's only two of us, or something like that. So it's relatively small scale items, or change in some wording to reflect the fact that we're just two of us and not half a dozen of us.
That's good.
So, but it kind of links to Tom's question though, you know, being certain about if an agreement with another council in some time in the future. I mean, our council would be reviewing that process so that we would making whatever we're entering into as watertight as possible. So I mean, I think we need confidence in that. And I think your question leads on.
That's the same question, whether it's whether or not
Yeah.
we just need to perhaps change some of that wording or clarify that for future reference.
Okay.
And I just note in this specific instance, that on behalf of both councils, providing advice on the.
Yeah.
on this.
Obviously, if there was any other partner considered that matter would come back to the council.
I mean, I think the questions that have been raised already I mean, I've had those questions sitting here, so it's great to get certainty, and I know these minutes will actually detail, you know, the questions and the purpose or the intent of that process going forward. Do you have another question, Tom?
Yeah, sorry, Claire, you just said there that if the situation were to change, it would come back to council.
Of course.
So that means that it is possible for the council to change this policy to allow the sale of shares privately or to a private organisation, because you said it could come back to the council.
It's specifically forbidden under the Act.
The Act.
But
What I was
could come back to the council?
referring to
Okay,
was,
so just one person talking,
Yeah,
please, thank
sorry.
you, Claire.
sorry about that.
No.
I was referring to if it was considered that we'd have a partnership with another local authority, that matter would come back to the council.
I have a sense of comfort that we've teased that out and we have clarity of thought, and the accuracy of the minutes will reflect that. So, thank you. I'll move on, Ross.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on that same vein, under the Act, under the current government, under the Act, is it relatively easy or hard for another government in power to change that? Is it just, we get a say in that, or how does that work? Can a new government just with a stroke of a pen change that Act? Or does it go through a select committee process that would?
So any government is not bound by any law of any past government. So the government could change the Act, they could do what they like. They could, your new government could come in and they could say, we're having 4 water companies for the country and you've got no choice. So obviously, when the government does that sort of thing, you get an opportunity through a select committee process to have your say, but governments do what governments do.
Thank you.
And of course, they could change the Local Government Act tomorrow and take your water services off you as has been proposed previously. So, you know, there's no guarantees.
And I think, you know, this term of reference is time bound until July 2026. The intent of the term of reference or the working group is to test the process alongside our counterparts in Kaikoura. You've seen the membership of that as well. So, you know, this is as Claire has said, in the scheme of things, a relatively short contractual process as we work through the issues and test assumptions, I guess, through that process. That's what the job of the working group will be. So is there any other questions? Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Madam. Through the chair, I just wondered in regards to the commitment agreement, has Kaikoura, have they looked at this? Are they doing that tomorrow? Thank you. I just wondered if there was any, if their councillors had any, you know, points of feedback that we might consider. But thank you.
I think that, you know, we've been through this process right through on this journey, and you know, we always, it's the right words, we're always one day ahead of in the governance decision making process. Good morning, Vince. So look, I'm just wanting to make sure, is there any other questions, because you know this is the first start of our next stage. So Karen, is there a question to clarify?
Yes, I'm just reading 6.3 on page 43, where it says that either council may withdraw its participation in this agreement at any time. We like get additional notice. so I guess it's kind of a escape clause or whatever. And I've just been pondering what the risks of that might be and what the possible reasons would be for that and how that might leave us if that were to
Firstly, in terms of what might trigger that. If, for example, we suddenly had a whole lot of other councils that were wanting to enter agreement, we might very quickly, I mean, obviously not for further down the track, but if that happened quickly, that could be a reason for reviewing it. In the event, which now looks extremely unlikely, that the water services delivery plan didn't pass muster, that could be a reason if we couldn't make it work. But we have indicative advice that we're getting in the right direction with that one. So there are things that you never know what could happen. You know, we could have another earthquake.
So I guess it would come, if that were to happen, it would be brought to our notice, I guess, and we would have an opportunity to understand that, discuss what might happen.
Yeah, I also think this is there for your protection as well. You have the opportunity to exit. So, this council might say, no, we're out. So, for whatever reason. So what we've done by having this clause is saying, look, things change, and for either party, and it's been a stat clause. That's what it's for.
We'll see on the sheet on page 49, the schedule for the time frame. Then we need to refer it relatively tight in the scheme of things. But I guess that's the benefit of having a smaller bespoke working group that can test again those processes that we're engaging in. So since we're on page 26 in your agenda, just looking at the paper on the commitment agreement with Kaikoura District Council. So good to have you here. So councillors, is there any other questions to clarify this position? And if not, happy to look at the officer recommendation on page 26 in your agenda. Thank you, Fiona.
I'm happy to move the recommendation. I think we've had a good discussion, and on behalf of the communities, I think some very good questions have been asked. Some of the questions that we heard ourselves when we were out in the community tested. So I think I'm happy to propose it.
Thank you. So we have the officer recommendation on page 26, which covers those three factors. And do I have a seconder from the council to move that resolution forward? Thank you, Tom. If there is no further questions in regard to the recommendation and the intent of this commitment agreement, all those in agreement, please say aye. Aye. Those against? That motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Claire. I know an enormous amount of work goes into preparing these, but we appreciate the content and the clarity. Thanks, councillors. That takes you through to page 60 in your report. And welcome, Liz. Nice to see you. Thank you. And this is a paper in regard to a right-of-way naming on Road. Yep, there again, it's been well set out in the report, but if you can just take us through this and we can see. Thank you.
So a petition has been received from the property owners on a right of way off Omahi Road. Just to put you in context of where that location is, Black Estate Restaurant there is on the right of way. Well, it comes off two right of ways, but accesses off this right of way as well. So
no relation. Sorry, just need to be clear. Just for the room. Yeah, thank you.
So the property owners have put forward the name Hillside Drive along with some other names. Hillside meets our rural and addressing policy. However, Drive is something that isn't, you meant to use way instead of Drive or other names. However, previously the council has approved using Drive for Inniskillen, which is a right of way. So I think it sort of set some sort of precedent there with that, and we have used other names other than way as well. Glenmark Community Committee supported got my recommendation in this report, so naming it Hillside Drive. And the rural urban addressing policy states that council may accept or decline a road name or may decide on another name. As you'll see, there's some alternative options there to be considered.
Right, so it's been to the Glenmore Community Committee, hasn't it, Fiona?
Yes, it has,
And they supported it, just
they
like.
supported it and also supported the greater clarification of finding for emergency services and any number of things to actually give a proper address and something.
And these new, they will have our numbering system as part of this whole new process, is that clarity, you know, our reason of why we're putting the numbering.
Yeah, so through the chair, they, there is some discussion around it. Yes, they do want record numbers. One particular property owner is keen to have record numbers, but maybe in a slightly different style, but still very visible and stuff, just because of the business and the look and stuff. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so you'll work through that
Yeah, I'll
with
work
the
with them on
individuals.
that.
Yeah, that's great, thanks, Liz, appreciate that. That sounds pretty good to me. Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Liz, I just do note and that it is a private road and that will not be maintained by the council at all.
Chair, yeah, that's great.
Right, good clarity, thank you.
I was just going to move.
Just see if Robbie, you got a question?
Well, yes, but it might
And
be
then I'll
more
come back to you.
for Kerry. There's five properties. I thought it was 6 you had to be. Has it changed?
Through the chair, if I can clarify that. Yes, so the policy talks about 6 properties or the ability to be able to subdivide into 6 or more. So these properties have the ability to be subdivided into 6 or more, and also there's obviously a lot going on up that right of way with a business, and then there's also visitor accommodation as well. So there's not currently 6 dwellings, but there's actually, you know, a lot more than a few dwellings that there are going on. So having some clear clarification around record numbers is positive.
Just a second.
Okay, that's great. I think we've got some real clarity. Fiona's happy to move it, Robbie's happy to second it. If there's no further questions, I will put that motion on. That please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That motion's carried. Thanks, Liz. Appreciate your work. Pick it up and we'll catch you next time. Thank you. Welcome, Jason. So we've got page 69, which is elected members' remuneration. There again, this is a fairly full report with some appendices attached to it. So yes, perhaps we'll just throw it over to you and we'll see where we get to.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the key issue is that the Remuneration Authority released the latest local government elected members determination for the forthcoming year, 25-26, and it is deliberately done in 2 parts. Portion up to the election, and then after the election. The background is there, the period from the 1st of July to the election, on page 69 and top of page 70 shows the relative increases for the elected members, bearing in mind that there was a 3.8% increase from last year. And I just report that those increases have already been allowed for in the last half of the last pay run that we made last week. And then, so that is for the period up to the election. Then post election, the Remuneration Authority has set the mayoral salary, but and the minimum allowance for councillors, but has indicated what the remuneration pool will be, and after the election and after decisions are made on additional positions of responsibility, the council will need to make recommendations to the Remuneration Authority how to split that remuneration pool for the councillors.
And that's early in the triennium, isn't it, Jason?
Very early.
That paper will come probably second paper after the new commitment.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, the remuneration pool has also increased, so there will be balance for that. They've also determined what the community board members and respective chairs will be paid, and obviously we've got the South Ward Community Board coming into to fruition after the election with the chair set to earn $12,000 and each member $6,000. The issue that we discussed way back in April in respect to the vacancy left by former councillor Gary Jackson, and the resolution was to submit a new proposal to the Remuneration Authority, dividing the remaining salary or the unused salary amongst the remaining 9 councillors. Now, just an issue here had been in respect to the timing of that resignation and the subsequent resolution of council meant any changes needed to be provided to the Remuneration Authority before the 31st of March for it to take effect for the remainder of the previous financial year. So that decision from council was the 29th of April. So we had no opportunity to be able to enact any changes for the remainder of the last financial year. Yeah, the specific wording from the Remuneration Authority's website is there. They made an amending determination in May. Any proposals needed to be to them before the 31st of March. But any proposals afterwards could have come into effect for the 1st of July. Now, with many other things on the go at the time, that sort of fell to the side, but I had made contact with the Remuneration Authority. They asked to make sure that if there was a change for the remainder of the triennium from the 1st of July to the election, that we needed to provide that information by the 10th of July. And I provided that on the 2nd of July. So we're just waiting for that determination to come through. If it is that the unused portion of former councillor Gary Jackson's salary can be applied for the remaining 3.5 months of the triennium, that will be backdated when we get authority to do so.
Thank you for that work. All these things take time, so thank you. Yeah.
Okay, now in respect to the determination, the page 71, there is a need for us to reflect some of the potential changes in our expense and allowance policy. And I'll just go through each component here, but the mileage allowance there, that hasn't changed. The kilometre rate is $1.04 per kilometre up to a maximum of 14,000 kilometres per annum, and then anything in excess of 14,000 kilometres is paid on the scale depending on the type of vehicle. One item that will make change is the time travel allowance. For the previous financial year, that was set at $40 per annum or part thereof. That's increased to $41.30. The hearing fees have also moved.
Sorry, skipping to the last one, that's per hour, not per annum.
What did I say? Per hour or thereof, or part thereof. Hearing fees have increased from $116 per hour to $130 per hour for the chair and 93 per hour to 104 per hour for members. No change to the internet allowance, no change to the mobile phone allowance. Just for completeness, I've stated what the determination discusses around childcare allowance, and the determination does allow for a maximum of $7,500 per child per annum after meeting key conditions. They state that the current policy of council does not pay childcare allowances. A new component that the Remuneration Authority have included in the determination is an allowance for home security. So clause 15 of the determination does talk about that, allowing for a maximum of $4,500 for installation, and then another $1,000 per annum for monitoring, call outs and repairs. And it's just a bit of top of page 72, it's just a bit more of a discussion, just to provide a bit of additional context to that allowance. And Jeff Summers, the chair of the Remuneration Authority, just provided some details in his covering email. And that's allowed for on the top of page 72, and then obviously there's been some discussions within the sector how this actually works. So there has been questions put directly to the Remuneration Authority, and I've just replicated those there just again to provide nothing more but a bit more context to that new allowance. So I suppose the key decision to be made, Madam Mayor, is we at the moment can't do anything specifically around the remuneration because that is set, but page 87 to 89 is just proposing the changes to the expense and allowance policy. So the key changes, obviously the date will change, but the time travel allowance amount will change. Just page 88, just recognition that we will have 2 community boards after the election rather than just the Hammer Springs Community Board. And our allowance policy does provide a limited internet connection allowance and a mobile phone allowance to community board members. Just reflecting that if we have any hearings with councillors or community board members pointed to that, the new rates proposed. And I've just taken it on myself, but obviously completely with your blessing that we continue with not providing childcare allowance. And I've sort of made an assumption the same issue would be adopted for the home security allowance, but certainly it is just a proposed policy. Opportunity now to make any changes.
Thanks, Jason. And just before we get into that, it's probably worthy of a note that the hearing fees, I don't think we no longer have anybody sitting around the table that is accredited to commissioner for RMA hearing. I let mine lapse July last year, I think it was. So just purely because we just don't get enough practice to consider those skills required to be a hearing commissioner. And it's my understanding that Chief Shires might still be current, but I'm not sure. Yeah, so from a community perspective, but it really is based on the fact that we just don't get enough hearing practice to use those different set of skills, I guess.
Yeah, but anyway.
Certainly, yeah, Madam Mayor, that was an issue when we were going through the hearing process for the district plan review, where we had, I think yourself and Councillor Davison, and to effectively pay the councillors, we had to actually take it out of the remuneration pool. But the hearings here are separate, and on top of this, any fees paid to licensing committee members can be separate to this as well. It's dictated by a separate act.
So yeah, I just offered that as clarity, but any discussion on the proposed policy adjustments on page 87, 88, 89, I mean, that's probably where the discussion is going to sit as opposed to the rest of the paper. So I'm happy to receive some questions. Thanks, Tom.
I would like personally the childcare allowance to be available. That would certainly encourage younger people to stand for election and make the remuneration closer to a realistic salary as someone who's getting council salary plus maybe 2 lots of 7,500 for 2 children would make it much more respectable. So personally, I would like to do that. How would we go about changing that policy? If I wanted to propose that as a policy change, how would we go about that? Or is that an amendment to this item that's on the table now?
Absolutely. If you deem it to be appropriate to amend, this is purely a proposed policy. If that was desired approach from the council, we can just state that the policy is available with these are the conditions that need to be met in terms of the determination. I will point out that we would probably need to have another look at this post-election as well. So I will bring it forward because they have a different set of councillors with a different view on any of these allowances.
But any prospective councillor who might be in that position, who might be eligible for that allowance, we've only got 2.5 days, less than 2.5 days to actually make that aware to any younger person who may be willing to stand to suddenly realise that they may be eligible for another 15,000 in allowances or 7,500 per child. I think that would be really personally very important, and I think that's something we should, if it were approved, we should get that message out as quickly as possible.
Okay. We'll just tease it out to see. I've got Vanessa. Thank you, Vanessa.
Look, I completely, wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Davies' proposal. Whether or not that carrot would be enough to entice someone to run for council, it certainly demonstrates that we are progressive, and as governance we are interested in good governance. So I completely support that.
Comments around the room, Karen and then Pauline.
Yes, I also support what Tom's saying. I think it would be really good to change it right now and to put that out there immediately. There are a few days left, and that would at least open up possibilities for people that may have been concerned and had been put off by the absence of allowance for reading in this district.
If I could just clarify through the chair, if council was to look at a childcare allowance, where would the funding for that come from?
Governance rates.
That would come from rates. Yeah. So I guess my questioning would be around, I wouldn't feel that I'd have enough information actually to make a decision on that at the moment. My questioning would be around, because I think getting different people, younger people, and a more diverse range of people around the table is really important. However, knowing that it could come at a cost to our ratepayers would be something that I think ratepayers kind of need to have a little bit of a say in. But I wonder too about information around what other sorts of positions would offer a childcare allowance, because I'm sort of certainly thinking, in my position as a teacher, you go to work, certainly the Ministry of Education isn't going to pay your childcare allowance for, you know, I mean, that's just an example, and I'm sure that that would be the case in most job positions, but I'm interested in understanding if there are roles in which, you know, a childcare allowance is payable for the sorts of reasons we're talking about. So, yeah, I guess that I'm sitting on the fence there.
And that's fair for Jason to.
Yeah, and that's, I
answer.
guess what I'm
Yeah.
saying is that I don't feel like I have enough information to make that decision, and I'd certainly like to understand what what my constituents feel is around that. Yeah.
I suppose for clarity, page 83 of the agenda there is provides some specifics around the conditions that need to be met for a childcare allowance, and it is stated quite clearly there. So if you did support adding that into the policy, essentially I'd be plucking those conditions and putting it directly into the policy. But they are the maximums. You could also potentially suggest something lesser than that as well.
Can I have a supplementary question?
Yeah.
Please. You've indicated that that cost would have to come from rates. So would that be an additional rate? And would that rate be applied to the ward in which the a councillor requiring childcare lived? Or would it be applied across the district? And would that be a new rate, or would it be funding that would come from somewhere else?
My initial thought, Madam Mayor, would be that it would be just part of the cost of governance, which similar to the mileage allowance or even salaries, which is currently paid for by the governance rate, which is half of that is funded as a fixed charge, the other half is funded as a capital value charge across the district.
I've got some questions. Vanessa, I'm going to come to you, and then Dave, and then Fiona. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm quite sure there's no legislative requirement for this for us to consult. Is that a question?
Yeah, no,
No,
I think you're right.
There is no requirement to consult because this is the maximum we can provide. I think Councillor White's concern was more around the budget component of it that has certainly not been allowed for in the budget for 25-26.
Yeah.
So subsequent to that, thank you, Jason. Subsequent to that, I could say with confidence that if we were to put this question to our constituents as to whether they're happy to fund childcare to create a better representation around the table, I'm sure that the majority would be happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, and then Fiona. Thanks, Dave.
Yes, through the chair, you know, I'm an absolutely impatient person. I think you're just putting a fox terrier in the chook house 2.5 days before it's been decided. So I think you probably need a little bit more time, and it should be on the agenda for the next triennium. So yeah, just late in the piece, so it's just too late. It's caused too much confusion.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate your comments. Fiona?
2 points really, Madam Mayor. I was looking for a clarification that the amount of 7,500 is a maximum, so it applies when you're attending meetings, assuming whether they be at council or of an evening. But I fully endorse what Dave said, that there's an opportunity for this to be looked at in the new training with the current council. I'm not sure and I'm not against it, because I think that it should be potentially going forward. But I don't think it's going to make a knee-jerk difference in the next 2 or 3 days on who might stand for council either. So a considered approach with a new council, whoever they are around the table, can propose that.
Thank you. Hearing some good points of view. So, Robbie?
Yeah, I would align with that thinking. The other thing is, I'd like to know how aligns with the government daycare allowance, whether there is no overlap or whether there's things there. I mixed feelings about it because I can think of umpteen other occupations where good candidates, potentially good candidates, can't apply because they're tied up with their business or they milk cows or whatever they're doing. So I've got mixed feelings about it, but I think in a new triennium, I'd need to have a little more information of what all the options were to make a decision.
Another point of view?
Very minor clarification. The 7,500 childcare allowance, is it only for councillors or would it also be available for community board members as well?
I think they talk about an eligible member, so I would imagine that community board members would be eligible for it if it was in place. I suppose bearing in mind that the number of meetings that community board members would need to have childcare would be significantly less than for council. So yeah, 7,500 you'd be struggling to reach that.
Thank you. We've had some pros and cons, I guess, and I think that every comment that we've had around this new policy direction is valued. And but I think, Dave, if I can use your words, because I think it's important to consider the childcare allowance for a new triennium when we get another one round the table, because we've also got the home security system as well that should be considered or could be considered. And we need to factor that this is potentially a significant increase to our ratepayers to pick up the cost to both of those implications. So I think I would support that this policy is adopted as it is at the moment, but up for review for the new triennium. And I think that provides some understanding, but some consideration of where we're at now. And you know, we need to put a policy in place that's actually going to be reflective of the people around the table. So that's where I would sit in that regard as well. So do I have any other considerations or points of view that need to be considered before we move on and look at this paper? Thank you.
So now we've talked about the child care allowance. Are we dealing with the home security separately, or are we just lumping that in all together?
Oh, well, I'm happy to take an argument from you if there is one, but I guess my opinion that I was conveying is that both of those new considerations should be brought into a new triennium's focus, and the decision, the policy direction should be considered by the new triennium. That's what I was thinking.
But would, if the new triennium, would they be able to action it from the 11th of October 2025, or would it not come into place for another 3 years for the following triennium? Because what we're saying is that if we leave it in limbo for over 3 years, that nobody's eligible for that. And also on the home security front, I personally wouldn't be applying for the home security because I already have it. But I do think, knowing some of the things that I have experienced and some of the other things that other councillors in the country have experienced, I think that should be available to all elected officials immediately, because I think that things are getting very, very serious and very dangerous out there. And I have taken legal advice through Hamish on some of the issues that I have experienced. And I do think that it is particularly important that we actually do allow and have an allowance for that home security, because I think that people are living in danger.
Can I just clarify Tom's point that he's raised, and rightly so? If the policy was considered early in the new triennium, it would be effective immediately from that. There would be no delay beyond the adoption of that policy. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's how if we, Any amended policy post-election will be as of that date or backdated to the date of the election. I do note, I can't quite read it properly or interpret it the same way in the determination, but Jeff Summers halfway down page 72 does say that note that clause 15, which relates to the home security allowance for the principal determination, will apply on and from the day after the official result of the election. So even though they've allowed for it now, it actually won't be available to after the election if it is going to be deemed to be put in place.
Could we then please have an agenda item at the earliest possible opportunity after the 11th of October, that the new council can sit and discuss this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we are forced to make a decision on how the remuneration pool will be allocated. The very same report will be the proposed policy as well, and obviously there's been some queries that we'll try and find some detail on to provide a bit more context.
Yeah. So this is all sits under the remuneration authority's determination, and it would need to be won't be on the first meeting, but it would be as close as, because it will determine the remuneration of councillors and the mayor going forward.
And that's traditionally what we've done. We've done it to meet the requirements now, but knowing that those requirements can change, and those allowances that aren't currently provided for may be more appropriate to provide for in the new training.
Oh, I've got Karen and Robbie, and then we'll see if we can get it just wrap up. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Henry. Is just to also put in the mix, I think it could be very useful for incoming council to know where we sit in comparison to other councils around this policy. Because I would really not like us to be out of step at all with what the majority of councils are doing as well. I think it would be helpful for councillors to have that.
We'll pull that through to when it comes to. Robbie?
Questions just been asked.
Okay, fantastic. So it feels to me as if we've got a shared understanding of the policy, and without with consideration to looking at the policy with the review on page 87, but with the knowledge, the safe knowledge that as soon as a new triennium post-election is formed, that the policy will be debated in its fullness, inclusive of the discussion around childcare allowance and the home security systems in a new policy direction beyond October. And I think that's the conversation that I've heard around the table, but we look at adopting this for the moment. Am I getting some shared nods? And if that was the case,
I would like to propose the amendment of the childcare allowance.
Here and now?
Yes.
Here and now, okay. So I guess we could, I could accept that and see if that gets get a second that, and we can then we can debate that. So give me your motion.
I would like to see the policy include a childcare allowance of up to £7,500 per child, with effect from the 11th of October 2025.
Isn't that what we're thinking, and that's beyond the new triennium?
Well, that's the beginning of the new triennium.
Correct.
Yeah. So I want to make that decision now before the new triennium sits.
Okay, you don't want to wait until a new triennium comes together and then debate it. Okay, beg your pardon, I didn't misread. Vanessa, thank you, Vanessa.
I would like to second that motion. I think it's a progressive and responsible move for the outgoing governance to make at this time.
Anybody like to speak to the motion that we have in front of us? So we're just talking about the childcare allowance. If I apply standing orders, speak in favour or against that motion before I put that in regard to the policy direction.
Yeah, look, I'm sorry, I agree with the sentiment, but I'd speak against at this stage because I'm wary of doing things a wee bit knee jerky. And I do believe that a new council sitting around the table, it affects them more than anything. I think I would rather wait until the new council looks at it.
Yeah, look, I'm going to speak against as well. I am absolutely all for anything that would encourage diversity around the table, but I do feel that this is, I feel confident that we could be recommending that this is discussed at the very beginning of the training, and that the people sitting around the table at that point in time are the people that I believe should be making that decision. I don't think it's appropriate for the outgoing governance to be making that now.
Anybody else want to speak for or against this motion?
Well, I would just add, we actually have discussed this in the past. And we didn't vote on it because it didn't apply to anybody here.
With that, I will put this motion, so it's a separate motion which will be inclusive. So you're comfortable on tracking the right route? Okay, there's no further discussion. All in agreement that we include the childcare allowance in the policy direction as of now, ahead of the election. That's the intent of the meeting. So we have a move and a second to that. All in agreement to that motion, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4. Those against? Correct?
Oh, sorry. 6 to my miscount.
Yeah, I thought it was 6 too.
No, Dave voted in favour of it.
Yeah, 4 in favour.
There's Vanessa behind you.
Yep, yep, 4 in favour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think that's.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise.
Yeah.
I didn't realise you voted.
Yeah, sorry. So that motion has failed. And so we'll go back to the recommendation that we look at the policy as written, and with the intent that the full policy review will come back to a council early in the new triennium. Do we need to include that in the officer recommendation? Feels as if it's a wee bit light on that as a judgment, or by approving the expense and policy as per page. Is that sufficient enough, councillors? Is that clear enough, the recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm happy to move the recommendation, but just to ensure that it will be back on the table, I'm happy to add in that little bit to ensure that the new council has the opportunity for this discussion, because I do think it's an important discussion. That said, I had a question about another part of the paper.
Okay.
Am I going to confuse things if I go back to that? Or
No, we'll take that question and then I'll come back to you with the recommendation.
Just purely a clarification, and I wanted to thank you, Jason, for the commentary on the paper. Just in regards, and I fully understand the dates around the adjustment to the remuneration, but I just wondered, what happens with the salary that would have been former Councillor Jackson's salary from the point of resignation to the point of that adjustment that the remuneration authority is allowing? Where does that go?
That it becomes a savings, and I did have like a robust discussion with the remuneration authority member on that fact. But he certainly had confirmed that sorry, we can't do it for that period, but you're doing everything I can to make sure it is for the remaining 3.5 months of the.
So it just goes back into the governance pool.
That's right.
That's fabulous. Yeah, that's great. Just good to know like where it's disappeared to.
My argument with him was that it is at odds with the intent of the governance pool, the remuneration pool, that it is fully allocated. So we've got a portion that is not allocated because of timing. But he certainly confirmed this is the absolute case. We cannot, and it was purely around timing. If the resignation was in March, it could well have been dealt with a little differently, and decisions made by council in March could have pushed that through and had it adjusted, but it's purely around that time.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, and as I said, happy to move that resolution with the addition that it be brought back to the new council very early in the triennium. And by that I mean the second meeting, I guess. Yeah.
That would probably be the intention.
Yes, and it will come anyway as a natural course of business with the remuneration whole information.
So I think we have an understanding of the intent that Councillor White has put the motion. Do I have a seconder for that?
Oh no, I was going to ask exactly the same question as White.
Sorry, Tom.
Can I just ask a question? You know, when you put out that people stand, we have to state what all these policies are, don't we? So it's going to be a bit awkward if people stand when they look at, oh, this is what your remuneration and all the benefits are, and then the first month of the council sitting, we change it all. Madam Mayor. I'm just questioning how that operates. Yeah, I suppose all we can do is currently what is allowed for, and I do state on page 70 when we determine the allocation of the remuneration pool. Close to 3 years ago, that there was a base level for each councillor, and then deputy mayor received that salary plus 40%, and the relevant years plus 20%. That's what we've currently in place. I think the previous triennium of the council was that everybody was paid the same, so there was no differentiation between councillors, and that's completely able to be done as well. So all we can reflect in the information going out for the candidate information booklet is what the current structure is, but bearing in mind that very early on in the triennium, sit around and thresh that out again.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Thanks, Vince. So we've got a seconder, we've got a mover and a seconder. We understand the intent, and I think it has been a valuable discussion that we all understand that we want, to be able to offer elected members the best opportunity to sit around here with confidence, and there's no debate around that. So, but I do thank you all for the intent of the discussion, because I think it has perhaps framed us up well or framed the council up well for a new triennium. So thank you for that. So a mover and a seconder. If everybody's comfortable with the motion, all in agreement to that, please say aye. Aye. Those against?
Through the chair, I'm voting against the policy, but I'd like to make it quite clear that I'm doing so purely for the vote on the childcare allowance.
Thank you.
If I may, please.
Thank you. So that motion is carried. So thank you all very much for that. What I propose we do now is break for morning tea. We've come back, we've got two other decision items, Nashville's Road and the Three Waters bylaw. before we go on to a discussion item. So if we adjourn now, it's 10 to 11. If we are back round the table at 5 past, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, move over, Dave, you approached my.
Oh, come on, cuddle buddies, cuddle buddies.
Rightio, thank you, councillors. As I said, we have 2 further decision items and Vanessa back, so that's cool.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just before we start, just relating back to the right of way naming. I should have declared a potential perceived conflict of interest, given that my brother was a submitter, but I spoke on behalf of the recommendation of the community committee. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
I can support that because I was at that meeting where and you're reflecting the community's intent of it. So I think if we can just get that recorded in the minutes for clarity, thank you for that.
And the current paper on the table, I've already declared, so I'll just sit back from the table in the discussion. Thank you.
Yep, we all understand that, so thank you for that. Okie dokie, so we have in front of us now the Maskell's Road ceiling survey results. It would be fair to say that council spent a significant amount of time in the attempt to collaborate and get a desirable outcome. We followed, we've worked through significant issues that have been put in front of us as a council, and now we have got some results that have been determined by the rateable units themselves. So Dan, I'm going to ask you to speak to this paper, and then we'll see where we get to. And I'll just remind councillors that the letter that was sent to us from Maskell's Road, or members of Maskell's Road, 3 in total. The letter, you've got that in front of you, so you'll factor that in, and then I'll ask Dan to consider the request, I guess, in regard to the letter. So we'll deal with this first and then work it through quietly. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for, I guess, to be for completeness, there is the responses that we have received are currently set in the public excluded agenda, and they're in the public excluded agenda for recognition of the privacy of the individuals provided the information. So that information is there. If you do want to talk about any of the specific responses that we've received, then we can't have that conversation in the open agenda. But nonetheless, within that are all of the responses that we received, and there's also a map showing each of the rateable units and how they voted. So I just want to put that out there for anybody that is listening to know that all councillors have seen that information. So in our recent meeting, you asked me to go back and write to the Maskell's Road residents of the rateable units, of which there were 24. So we wrote a letter to each of those. One of those didn't have a letterbox, so we wrote to their private address, which is in the Joint District. They actually responded, so we know that we did reach them. Of the 24 rateable units, 23 have responded. And if I just remind you that you were looking for 75% of the rateable units in favour of a 50-50 share of $654,000 to seal 1.7 kilometres of Maskell's Road, which is the current maintained section. So we put the letter out. Of the 23 respondents, you can see on page 91 there is a very small table that shows you the response. We asked essentially 3 questions, but 2 of those related to whether or not they were in support of sealing the road. So, and there were 2 payment methods. One was a lump sum, one was a targeted rate. So 5 people, 5 rateable units said they supported the lump sum, 6 targeted rate, but 12 all in all did not agree. So that's rather than getting a 75% in favour, there was 48% in favour. So to the question, can we achieve 75%? The answer is no. So in terms of all of the dialogue that we've had up to that point, my recommendation is that the matter closes, and I wrote that in the letter to the residents at the time. Subsequent to that, we've now received a letter from the first 3 residents on the unsealed section of Maskell's Road, which is the letter which you see. The team have been looking at the tender price that we've received, and using the schedule of rates, we've managed to reverse engineer a price based on the first 300 metres only, and that price would equate to, we'd have to get it formally quoted, but based on the schedule of rates would be 228,000. So we would apply some contingency to that in the region of 10% again, like we have done all the way through. That gets it to about $250,000 to seal that first 300 metres of road. So on a 50-50 share, that would mean that each of those 3 residents would be paying somewhere in the region of $40,000. So it's a significant difference between that price and the number that we've put out there in terms of the lump sum or the paid off over the 10 years. And that's specifically because
within the contract rates, you've still got all your traffic management costs, you've still got all your site establishment costs, so they're not, they won't be spread across the 1.2 kilometres, you'll still be paying for those sorts of prices, so like I say, we'd have to formally get it priced, but that's our indication at the moment. And I guess if you were to make a decision on that today, then you would be then making the decision around, there's also the section 80 review that you've recently undertaken. Now, my reading of that is that probably the 3 key points that you deliberated on wouldn't apply in this instance, so we'd have to rethink the section 70 and how that would apply. And also, I would encourage that there is some thought around whether or not 125,000 of council money on 300 kilometres, 300 metres of road is actually best use of that expenditure. So I'll leave it there, Madam Mayor, and open for questions.
Can I just for clarity in my own mind, so if there was an agreement, I'm just trying to work through, is it a piecemeal approach to sealing the road or not? So there is this, from the T intersection at the bottom end of Massey Road, there's a certain portion that is sealed, and then it goes on unsealed in its current status. If there was 300 metres of, you know, if this proposal from the 3 ratepayers, does that mean it would be a seamless seal, or will it be sealed, unsealed, and then sealed again? Do you get that intent of my question?
Yeah, so the 3 that have written to us as part of that letter, they're the first 3 from the seal, so it would be a seal extension from where it's currently sealed. So that's the front end of seal.
Yeah, so the continuous length of seal
Yes.
up beyond those.
Correct.
Because I was just trying to consider in my mind, just reflecting back to that section 80 report and how that could be reflected and a reason to deviate from policy. I was just trying to work through in my own mind how that might work, you know.
Yes. Madam Mayor, I mean, it's just to remind everybody that the 3 key points that you were looking at is that the significant number of fragmented nature of historical infill section development on Massfield Road. So the geography and layout of the road and the combination of these factors contribution to road safety. The realistic and imminent probability of more infill subdivision on Massfield Road. Now those, the infill areas are beyond the area.
Yeah, okay. I think that's really important. Sorry, I'll come to you. I think that's really important for us to consider, in the fact that it would need to be considered some new Section 80 support to deviation from policy. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. I'll go to Vince, then I'll come to you, Dave. Thank you, Vince.
Exactly what I was saying. I think that's a totally different thing. We're here today to discuss this one, and I think it's another day, and we'd need a lot of information before we could make any decisions on that. So to me, I think we've received a letter, but that's not been tabled in the meeting before the business, so I just stick to what we've approved here today.
Yeah, so what you're saying is this is a separate case that we are requesting to bring closure to, but if there is other options, that needs to be analysed and it's on its merits through a separate paper. I think that's what I'm hearing from you.
Because it actually opens up a lot of issues in our with the rest of our district on roading. You know, we could have people popping up from anywhere wanting Vixen Road sealed. And we do have problems with beginnings and ends of tar seal shingle.
That's great. Thank you, Vince. Just from Vanessa, I'll come to you, but I'm going to go to Dave first. So Dave and then Vanessa. Thanks, Dave.
This process has gone so long, and I don't believe it needed to take so long and cause so much angst. I don't think we've got anything to lose at the moment to get the contractor that priced it, to give a price on 300 metres. You might find that these people want to pay it themselves. And what have we got to lose to ask the contractor to go back and reprice it for 300 metres, as long as there's rather than we make a decision what Vince is saying on this, and then it comes back again, and you just drag this damn thing on and on and on. Ross and I were putting up a bloody road, we could have it done in 2 months. How many years has this taken? So it just, you're gonna, so I probably disagree with what Vince is saying, but we need to just find out how much it's gonna cost, because it may not be as much, it might not be.
I guess, just to try and pull together Vince's thoughts and your own thoughts, there may well be an opportunity for us to ask officers to go and speak, get some accurate pricing and speak to the 3 rateable units. If there is an agreement, well, if there is a progress. If there's no agreement, well, the decision that we've got in front of us today, I guess, would apply. I think that's where we're sort of heading
What I'm
towards.
saying is a decision on the 75%, it's not happening, but the 300 metres could happen, but just find out how much, and then they're gonna say no.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Vanessa, can I hear from you?
Yes, thank you through the chair. Look, I agree with Councillor Hislop and Councillor Daly on both points to a certain extent. I feel that, Dan, can you remind me what you gave a rough estimate as to what you thought this 300 metres would cost, did you not?
Around 250,000.
Okay, thank you. Look, we're not here today to actually discuss this, but I feel that we actually owe it to these residents to give some public acknowledgement to their letter. And I think before we direct officers to do further investigation, I'd like to get some indication from around the table as to the appetite for spending any money on 3 residents. Whilst I understand where they're coming from, and I certainly agree with many points that Carolyn raises in her letter, I think we have to take into account the perception from the district that we are prepared to half fund a project that affects 3 people or 3 houses. Thank you.
So that you're probably in line with the recommendation from your commentary. Thank you, Vanessa, it was really appreciated. So I think I've just got another couple of hands up around the room, so I'll go to Ross, and then I think Robbie and Pauline would like to express. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I look at this and I know the journey it's taken to get here, the amount of time, staff time that's gone into this, and we've called it flat. And I guess that sort of frustrates me a bit. It's like, well, spend our time doing other more useful stuff. But look, we've gone through the process, we've done all we could, and the people have said, they've spoken. And I guess I hear what both Vince and Dave are saying, and I guess if the figures worked out that for 3, it was still the same amount relative that council was putting in, then I would, because it's not, if you understand me, it's relative for that quarter of that road, because 300 metres is a quarter of that length. So if the figures worked out relative, the amount we're paying was the same in proportion, then I would go along with that. But if it was more than that, it's like, no, we've given it our best shot, and unless you people on that road want to front up with more, that's your choice. But I know that I've got to be careful here, because I shouldn't be talking about stuff that could be impeded. But the 3 that responded in the letter, do you know if they canvassed their neighbour? Because I see there's some neighbours might have been in favour of the road sealing. Do you know if they canvassed them to see if they were prepared to?
Madam Mayor, I've only received the same letter that you have, so I don't know. So I suspect not, otherwise that they would be, if they were in support, then they would also be referenced in the letter.
Yeah. So I presume that it's been asked, but haven't. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you.
Yeah, like this, if this was easy, we would have done it about 2 years ago. And we're trying to find a mechanism to support the request of a community. We're bound by certain requirements of law to consider the impact for the affected parties, but actually for the rest of the district as well. And we've made this decision that's sitting in front of us on the Section 80 report. Why are we deviating from our policy? So I think we need to be really careful that we don't complicate that and add in details that actually don't apply to what we considered previously, to the fragmented infill, the layout, road safety, and the probability of further infill. They were the factors that allowed us to deviate from policy. So I think we need to keep ourselves mindful of that actually in context. But Robbie, do you have something else? Oh, that doesn't real. Robbie, thank you.
This one has been a long one, and I for one have probably been one as guilty as anybody of perhaps, letting the heart rule the head a wee bit. But I've got to change that thinking. I've been reminded now around the government's direction that we are core business. This one is still going to be, if we were to continue on, we're still outside policy, we've still got a problem there. We still can't justify the Section 80. We're looking at a price of 250 odd. The residents' letter was an expectation or an assumption that it might be about 90,000 less than that. I think, do we go back around the bushes? Are they realistically going to stump up another 30k each? And the other big thing for me is we missed the annual plan consultation step on this one. I wouldn't fancy my chances asking the rest of the district how they feel about 250k for 3 properties, when there's other roads and things around the district that are perhaps need a culvert replaced or whatever. So for me, where it is right now, I'm in favour of the officer's recommendation.
That's great. I think we're getting to a point of consideration, and I would just ask you to turn your mind to this is a separate process, and managing this is a separate process. And then I'm happy to see if there's anything beyond that, but I think for the moment, what we've got in front of us in regard to the Section 80, why are we deviating from policy? The matter probably sits as the recommendation as it is at the moment, but if there's any other commentary before we look at the motion, Vince.
Just on this second part with what we do with the funds, spending it. Jason, it's borrowed money, isn't it? The 300 and our share.
No, it wasn't. In the roading account, there was a fund left over after the end of expected a fund left over at the end of the last financial year, and that's largely due to not spending high cost, low risk money. So it was factored in as part of utilising some of that that fund, but if that's not used, remain there. And so I think Dan's recommended that it sits there for potential emergency purposes, because we don't have the fund for emergency purposes.
Just because of carrying on to that, because we put it in our annual plan that we were going to do this if we've got approval. So we are rating for it, aren't we? Really, that money?
No, we weren't specifically rating for it, because we are using existing funding or existing funds that are there, but because even if it's in the annual plan, there is no obligation to spend if there's no need for it. So we'll end up savings, or we'll take that unspent money, or the council's unspent portion, back into the fund and hold it for other purposes.
So so it won't just go back into the roading account.
That's correct. Yeah.
So
My apologies, Pauline.
said I was gonna come to you and I'm
Fine, Madam
This was giving me the eyeball, so I went there, so, but I come back, I do apologise.
No, it's absolutely fine. Look, I firstly wanted to actually acknowledge the residents who have responded to the letters, because I fully respect the reasoning for the people who do not agree with paying this, and I fully respect the challenge for the people who do agree and who do want this. But we were very, very clear. It was not an easy thing to deviate from our policy. It took us a lot of discussion, a lot of debate to get those 3 criteria under the Section 80 to deviate from that policy. So for me, the question here is our policy fit for purpose? And I believe it is. So as has already been pointed out, to do anything other than what was suggested here is a further deviation that doesn't fit with the Section 80 criteria that we've come up with. So I'm quite comfortable with deciding to hold the allocated funds in abeyance. I'm quite comfortable with us sending a letter to each ratepayer of the outcome. I don't know that the words "close the matter" sit comfortably with me, because I do still respect that for those few residents, there is still an issue. And in saying that, it doesn't necessarily mean, that we're going to regurgitate it all, but I just want the people to understand that we still see the issue. It hasn't gone away, but we have in all our abilities, we have tried really hard to find a solution. So for me, the policy is fit. Anything outside of this is a further deviation. It's a whole other discussion. So I'd be in support of the officer recommendation, but I'm not comfortable with the words "the matter is closed." I don't think that sends the right message. I think the matter of us sealing 1.2 kilometres at a 50-50, I think that is closed, but the matter as a whole is not. That's where I'm sitting.
Okay, I'm just wondering, before I put this to a vote. Oh, sorry, Dave.
Yeah, reflecting on and listening to what everyone's saying. It's closed at the moment about, the way I look at it, this was a 75% we didn't get it. So my issue is just how long it's taken us and heartache to get there. And I'm now thinking, and I still would like to know how much it's going to cost for that 300 metres, because then those 3 people can decide to 100% fund. 100%, if it's a real issue to them, they then have got a choice to 100% fund it themselves, or make a decision, we don't want to live here and we might move. That's the other decision I've got too. Going forward, and it's a WIMAC solution, because I know my friend's right in the middle of this, of doing an infill subdivision, he has to tar seal the road himself as a part of a development. So my question in our district plan, if there was another subdivision happening in there of 10 houses, 6 houses, what is the criteria that we would then say to the developer, you need to tar seal this road for it to happen? Do we have that, Judith, or we don't? Maybe that's more important going forward, if there's a subdivision of 10, 12, whatever, and that's what WIMAC do. And it must be 2 or 3 kilometres they having to do, but I don't know. Do we have that?
Madam Mayor, I think I can have a look at it.
And what criteria does it?
I don't know that off the top of my head. So I guess that's something beyond this discussion that's in front of us. And I'm just wondering, I'll come back to you, I'm just wondering whether we look at this, we've considered this, we've tried to find a pathway of
least resistance, best outcome for a number of people over a long time, 3 or 4 years probably, you know, so the comments that have been made first and foremost by you, Dave, are absolutely accurate. There is an internal cost that hasn't been factored into this, and we couldn't get that threshold. I'm wondering whether, and sitting with the recommendation, this particular matter, as we see it at the moment, is closed because we haven't been able to, you know, achieve, or we haven't found the threshold of interest, but actually we need to coming back to that section 80. So this probably is closed, but if you found favour in that, perhaps there is an opportunity for us to direct Dan to speak with the 3 rateable units in question, get an accurate costing, as you say, and see if there is a pathway available to them with the intel you have, Dan, with a ceiling option or other options, and have a discussion with the 3 rateable units. If we look at this as a process closure, then we could direct Dan to have that discussion, accurate costings, and if there was no appetite for 100% funding of that 300 metres, you would have to bring it back to us, and we would have to determine whether it was sat inside policy or not. So it would take a bit more time, but I'm just wondering whether this as a process is at closure, but if there is an opportunity for Dan under our support to have that discussion to see if there are other some options available, it's pleasant and agreeable to the 3 rateable units, because I think we need to close this off. Do I have support around the table for that position? And if not, maybe some alternates that we can test in debate. I've got Vanessa and I've got Robbie, and I think you have Pauline, and I'm going to try and keep it to my pathway. So thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, through the chair. I guess this all really comes down to, in my mind, at the end of the day, as to whether we collectively agree as council that we actually have some responsibility around this issue, or at the very least some responsibility about acknowledging that there is an issue. And if that is the case, I would actually like to move the officer recommendation, but I would like to reword it to say that we confirm closure of the survey process.
Do you think by altering that sorry, just thinking, if I may, Vanessa, that altering that wording gives an opportunity for us to then direct Dan to have a further discussion and see what that discussion. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, but I just want to hear from Robbie and Pauline. Thank you.
I just want to raise a flag around the 50-50 thing. If we were to put that on the table again, if we were to put it on the table again, which I don't think would be a good idea. There's been questions in different parts of the district, for example, the simplest thing of new footpaths and driveways from boundary fence to the road. Now, if you're going to put 50% on something like this for 3 people, I think you open a can of worms for everyone to say, well, I'll have 50% of my driveway as well, please. So I see some real danger in that. So I think if Dan was to go back to the 3 people, probably the first discussion would be, this is the cost, and would the 3 of you stump for that? Because to open up that can of worms again around, to go outside our policy, I think it would push us back to look at the policy again without going willy-nilly, just we're popping outside of it for here and there. I think we go back to the old story, we open that can of worms and set precedent. So I would be against
that. Sorry, I probably didn't articulate when I spoke before, closure of the matter. I think Councillor McPherson has perhaps got some words very close there. So closure of the 1.2 metre 50-50 ceiling. I would, but I just don't want to say closure of the matter, full stop, because there's still a matter there for these residents, whether or not we like it. Just in regards to if we adhere to policy, and if it becomes a 100% funded ceiling undertaken by residents, then that would be an external process now, wouldn't it? It actually wouldn't have anything to do necessarily with us at council, because maintenance of that, would it fall to the residents, or would it be vested? Or I'm just a bit concerned about the suggestion of, you know, Dan going back and providing costings and whatnot, whereas if we're adhering to the policy, surely it becomes the residents' pathway now. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that we're not then stepping into, by virtue of what we do, we're not stepping into somewhere where actually we shouldn't be. If we're going to say, right, policy stands, we should, yeah.
Well, Madam Mayor, policy does say 100% funded by the applicant, but the plans before the undertaking is still subject to our approval.
Right.
Because it still needs to meet our road conditions, because, yeah, there is an expectation that it does become vested with us once the liability period is ended.
Right, so then it is important that we are part of that process
Yeah,
to ensure that the level of service is where we would expect it, given that we're going to maintain it.
And that's laid out in the policy.
Yeah, great, thanks for that clarity.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? As I'm going to come back to Vanessa with a motion with wording. Thanks, Dan.
Madam Mayor, can I just, it's also worth mentioning as well, when we got these tender prices, we got them several months ago now, and we already know that the lowest conforming tenderer has been knocking on the door, asking for the work and saying, when's it coming? So if I go back and say, well, it was 1.2 kilometres, now I'm looking for a price of 300, they might actually refuse to quote. So we might then have to go and find somebody else that will quote. So I'm just putting that out there as well, so the price might change.
Yeah.
But in all fairness to the roading team, they've done quite a good job actually of looking at the price, the schedule of prices, and I would suggest that that's pretty accurate based on the current value of the works that we've got proposed at the moment.
I mean, I'm happy to leave that with the specialists and your team to manage that as well. Thank Vanessa, I'll come back to you. Have you got some
just one quick thing, sorry, through the chair. So can I just confirm that we are directing Dan to go back to the residents and to get a further quote for the 300 metre piece of road on the basis that we are all happy to support a 50-50 model? Is that correct?
No.
So Madam Mayor, I think you need to be really careful about this. The 50-50 model was supported by a Section 80 report.
Yeah.
This request is completely different to the previous request and requires a new Section 80 report. So that if you are going to depart from 100% funding, you need to have a Section 80 report that you've considered. So it will require a new Section 80 report to be written if you're going to depart from the 100% funding model. So you can't decide on the funding model right here and now without that information.
Yep. So I think it would be best practice to look at the recommendation to close off this part of the process here and now, and then consider what are our options going forward. We can't conflate the two together, because we need to be very clear that the enduring process that we've gone through for the last 4 years, consulting, listening, having public meetings, you know, all of those things that have been time consuming, but that actually we never met the threshold, which was the intent of the offering, and that brings closure, for lack of a better word, to this part of this process. So I think we need to deal to this right now, and then perhaps consider what are our options, and have we got agreement to provide some governance oversight and direction to Dan and his team. So that would be my preference around that. So I'm coming back to, sorry, I'm going to come back to you, Vanessa, to see if you've got some appropriate wording, if we need to change the word at all, understanding the intent of this recommendation is to for this to be managed and completed, And I'll come back to you, but I'll hear from Vince and then I'll come back to you, Vanessa, to get that recommendation or to bring this closer to an end.
So what is going to be, are we going to be voting on the officer's recommendation, or is there changes to it? I just didn't quite understand.
Okay, have you got any new words? Are you happy with the recommendation as worded, Vanessa?
I would like it changed to reflect that it is a closure of the survey process. However other word you may choose to use, but to indicate that that we are today deciding that it is the end of that particular process, not the end of the issue.
Okay. Got any supports to that?
Yeah, look, I just want to propose that we're a bit clearer there, and that rather than just saying the survey process, that we say that we can confirm closure of the 1.2 kilometre 50-50 ceiling. I want to be really specific about what we're closing.
Okay.
Not just the survey, it's now off the table.
Yeah.
We've been through the process.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So got some revised words, Vanessa.
What I said was closure of, well, okay, closure of this survey process.
Okay, I think
because it really means the same thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think we are talking about the same thing. So I'm going to go to Wordsmith here to the left, because I'm sure he's come up with some eloquent wording around that, Graham, that probably says the same thing that we're both offering here.
Madam Mayor, I've just got there, the council confirms closure of the survey process for the ceiling of 1.2 kilometres of Mascalls Road on a 50-50 basis, and then it continues on.
I think that probably says it all. I'm thank you, Graham, I knew you'd save me. Are you happy with that, Vince?
Yes, and you've got what we're doing with the funding that we're not spending.
Yeah, that's right. That will be part of that. So I think we've heard from elected members that we've refined the wording. Graham has put that into a recommendation. We understand there's two parts to this, but have we got shared understanding of that? You're happy with that? I'm going to put that motion in a minute. Dan, something else to say?
Just at the risk of splitting hairs, Madam Mayor, you have one offer on the table, I suppose, through a letter from 3 residents. What if another resident comes up and says, I want to do something different? What about, would you consider other alternatives from other residents, other rateable units on that road? My wording in there closes it, and it doesn't prohibit anybody else coming forward and asking you a different question, but I'm just concerned, I suppose, that we're leaving the door open to a myriad of other requests that might come forward. And I am conscious of, I guess, effort and time and ultimately money that we've put into to get to this point so far.
Yeah, I take the point, but I think in due respect that any other players that might come to the market, we would still need to consider our policy as it stands, and that we would have to assess that on information that would come in front of us. So I wouldn't like to even preempt what other people came. That's no different to someone on, Joe Blogg's road up the back of Harden. Like it's exactly the same, isn't it? So this will be a completely new scenario.
Well, apart from that, all I would say, Madam Mayor, is, I mean, we've got lots and lots of policies. And often officers' job is to follow the policy, and we do relay that to people to say, no, we don't enter into these one-on-one deals because this is the policy. And we do, bat a lot of these sorts of issues, not away, but we deal with them without them coming to this table.
I haven't got an answer really, but I think that we're probably diving into the unknown, really. Yeah, it would seem as if we need to deal with what's in front of us. Whatever's the unknown is the unknown. If I would like to think, actually, Dave, your solution around new subdivision, sealing, what do our neighbours do, how can we manage that in a different way? And perhaps that's a consideration that comes from this discussion, you know, that it's not, and that would actually mitigate some of those issues that you've just raised actually as well, Dave. Thank you.
So very briefly, I'm just thinking, we need to close the 1.2, finish, that's easy. So putting it back in their case is because you've got a contractor that wants to do it. That's just do a contractor, 300 metres, what's it gonna cost? Go back to them. Are you gonna, our policy is 100%, you're happy to fund that, or go to them before 100% fund it. And they say, no, you don't need to go back to a contractor. We don't need to make things difficult, A couple of phone calls and job's done.
I think we're all on the same page here, so we have, I think we've got a mover and a seconder here, Pauline and Vanessa, or Vanessa and Pauline, one way or the other. Did you see?
Happy for Vanessa
Yeah.
to move it.
Okay, Vanessa moved, Pauline seconded, is that correct? So we understand the motion, the intent of the motion. If there's no further discussion, I am going to put that motion with those two sort of clauses, all in agreement with that, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That motion's carried. Thank you. All for the intent. Dan, thanks to your team, but we cannot go just yet because I think you understand what's the expectation now. You know, get a indicative price, have a yarn, policy applies, and we'll deal with that as it sits at the moment. Are you comfortable with that as sufficient direction for you?
Yes.
Okay, everybody's happy with that? And also perhaps consider, are there any other subdivision criteria, district plan stuff? I'll leave that with officers to manage whenever we do a district plan review or what. Does that sound about?
Yes, Madam Chair, although I note the government prohibition on land
Plan
use.
changes. Yeah. Anyway.
What was that? I missed that.
The government is putting a prohibition in place on plan changes.
Okay, I am going to move on, councillors. Thanks very much for that discussion. Thank you for the intent of trying to do the best we can for members of our community, but you know, there has been a big investment in trying to understand the issues and the integrity that we have managed that process needs to be admired. So thanks very much. Claire, good to have you back. We've got in front of us the Three Waters bylaw, which is kind of one of those things that are sort of sitting in the moment in the midst of a big change. So we'll hear from you and see where that sits for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you have seen in the paper, the Three Waters bylaw has expired. It is required to have some sort of action taken before we get to this December, otherwise it will lapse. It is proposed that what we do is to apply the provisions of the Three Waters legislation to further review of the bylaw, because there's quite a lot going on, and it would then mean that the WISCO could then provide input to the bylaw when it's reviewed next year. The alternatives to that are either to review it now, for which there's limited time available, or to do a light review, for which it would also be pretty tight.
So we are, in essence, we are able to defer the review under section 54 of the Local Government Act. So that keeps us within, but as we work through the remainder of the process, we are in orders. So is there any queries or questions about what we've read or what we've heard from Claire this morning? It seems to me fairly sound government's direction. So Fiona?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it speaks for itself really with everything, so I'm happy to move it as written.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, Vince?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion, Robbie?
Yeah, just a wee question, page 94, number 5. What are the issues we might have to live with?
Some of the suggested changes are included in the paper about things we would like to tweak. A lot of them are operational matters.
Nothing that's going to worry us, no.
There is the matter of the budget for for the roadway width of 20 metres, but that's already been discussed by this council.
Okay, nothing purely that we're aware of, by using the section of the Local Government Act to defer that for the moment. So, I'm sure our officers will keep us all over these sorts of things as time goes on. So, have a move, I've got a second that, if there's no further questions, I will put that motion. All in agreement to that, please say aye. Aye. Those against, that motion's carried. Thanks, Claire, fantastic. Okay, thanks councillors, we're doing pretty well, thank you. So that comes to the end of our decision items, and we have a discussion item, which is the Canterbury Water Management Strategy Zone Committee Review. And Hamish, this has got your name, so
yes, Madam Mayor, I'll take the paper as read. As you can see, it's been prepared by the Canterbury Mineral Forum to provide an update on the zone committee review process. And I will leave you to discuss the matter. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. So those of you, I mean, it's all spelled out here, but a review of the zone committee, you will be very aware that we opted out of the zone committee process from 2 terms ago. And this is a review that's been taken across Canterbury. So Vince, question.
I'm just reading through it, a lot of it seems top down a bit. Just reading. Just seems to be the council sort of everything sort of been in. Doesn't have people that actually, I'm just.
Yeah. So the importance of having the voice of the people is really important.
Well, nothing will happen if you don't get that.
Yeah.
We just never talk fest group.
And I guess that's what caused, I mean, across Canterbury, there is varying levels of support for the zone committee process as it is at the moment, or as it was when we left it. And there are other areas that are considering looking for change, and this review was a mechanism to allow that to happen, really, so but certainly since, as you will know, that the zone committee was fit for purpose for a period of time in our community, did a lot of really good work with the implementation of the ZIP and the addendum to the zipper, and yeah, so this is an opportunity for us to find a better option, or an option that's more agreeable to the community. It feels as if this process is also saying it won't be the one frame that's going to be across all authorities, that you can design a structure that's going to work best for your community. And I know jolly well that this community will expect community voice, community stakeholders to be at the centre of, or very much participatory action, rather than the top down that you've talked about. So yeah, that's a view.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I take comfort on the top of page 100 there that it talks about flexibility, connection with communities, being critical, and can tweak aspects to meet local needs. So that sort of reassured me that it won't be so much top down, but a bit of bottom up as well.
Finding that balance, isn't it, really? And this paper is going back to, it's discussed at the main Mayoral Forum, Hamish. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend that, but is there anything from that discussion at Mayoral Forum in Kaikoura that might add value or be of value? For
just noting that similar matters were raised and discussed there before the Mayoral Forum project. So,
yeah.
I think that the issues that we raised here have been well understood.
Thanks, Fiona.
Okay, just for clarification, but we haven't been out to the, is there an opportunity to take this out to the community to have a look at what models might work for them, or is it just will be decided higher up the chain?
I'm not aware, I mean, no, to date, to be upfront, that this has been, this format has been developed through the working group. There hasn't been an opportunity, it will come to this council, and I guess this council, or the people sitting at this table, will decide the way forward, you know. I'm not sure whether it will go for full consultation. It will probably be decided around this table. Does the framework work for this table and on behalf of its community, or do we tweak and change or manage it or do whatever? But I think it will sit around this table to make that decision, as opposed to being consulted with the community. But to be fair, that hasn't been canvassed. I sit on that working group and it hasn't been canvassed as such.
Thank you for that clarification, because to me, tweaking is not adjusting or incorporating, it's tweaking. And I know that's one of the reasons that we pulled out, was because the community was pushed further and further out of it, and it was more of this oversight. So given that a lot of the work that's done is on that land and affects people directly, and we've got a lot of people who are committed a lot of time and very engaged in the process, if they are not included in our rural areas, then it would be hard to say that this is a model that's going to work. It's a slight change and who's sort of in the top part, and which I don't disagree with, but our landowners need to be equal partners in it, and it can't just be at the top.
100%. Yeah, totally understand that. Robbie?
It's just likely to be affected anyway with some of the rumblings from central government around regional government and the role that plays, or whether you go another end of the spectrum down to the local level. Is anything likely to change there with some of the rhetoric that's at the moment?
I don't know. I can't really. I certainly can't answer that question with confidence. But you know, yes, you know, it certainly is some question around form and function of regional councils, but you know, that's probably not really aligned with the CWMS and the strategies that sit with that. So I don't know.
I think there's been some rumblings in central government about the FMU, the freshwater management unit concept, and this relies on that FMU concept. So these zone committees are not on strict council boundary lines; they're about catchments rather than councils. And so if you look at the map on page 101, you'll see that you know, although most of area 2 is in the Huranui district, there's a green part up there which is actually in the Clarence Waiaotaua zone. And so looking at the table on page 100, we have an ancillary interest in that zone, but that's essentially a Kaikoura zone, but we have an ancillary interest, and likewise on the Waimakariri catchment, then we have a slight interest in that area as well. So normally in a local government sense, the rivers are the boundaries that divide us, but in this particular case, we're looking to work across boundaries, so the groupings are slightly different.
So you'll see on page 100 what the next steps are, but I've been tasked with pulling together the chairs of the Runanga Regional Council, local stakeholders, to test the next steps, and that will be, you know, that will be inclusive of members of our community. So, you know, and you'll all remember that we sort of always envisaged a land and water committee, which would be the replacement model, and that may actually be the direction that we're taking. That was always our thinking in those very early days, going back 6 years, with having a much smaller governance group, because that's where the talking's done. But through, in the absence of the zone committee, we've had the evolution of some really strong or strengthened community groups, the Hiranui District Land Care Group, you know, the biodiversity group. There's a whole lot of influence at that grassroots that Vince first talked about that actually is sort of influence how we don't need a big group of zone committee of 20 people sitting around a table, but actually a smaller group. And I think the intention is to meet sort of 4 times a year in that governance, but let the people that are doing really good influential work to keep enabling that to happen, because that's where the good stuff is happening. And they do it when we get out of their road and let them do it. Yeah. So I think that's sort of the plan, really. That's what I think would work best from this community perspective. So I just heard yesterday actually that you may know this, Vince, but Ben Ensor is the chairperson of the Aotearoa Catchment Group Collective, it's called, which is an influential, so that's across New Zealand. So it would seem like it would be a really good opportunity to bring him into that early discussion of actually, because he'll have a much broader picture of what's happening up and down the country. So it's a bit of work in progress, to be fair. Anything else, Dan?
Yeah.
No. Any other questions? Thank you.
No, thank you for the explanation, and I think it's a way forward. It sounds like it could have positive results and some work ahead, but I move that the information be received.
Sorry, can I just ask a very quick question? The UCAN's forecast for the costs of these committees is about $1 million, $1.92 million. Are we therefore committing ourselves to a proportion of that $1.92 million?
In the old zone committee days, there was a portion of the funding that went to that, but I'm not sure what cost will be, but there will be a cost to governance around that, as there was in the old zone committee days where we provided secretarial support, all of those things. There was a cost to this to govern that. So that cost
could be several $100,000.
I don't know what the cost would be. Do you have any ballparks around that?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Because it's going to depend on how the group's constituted, whether there's remuneration, how often they meet, what the expectation of officer times, etc. So it's, yeah, I don't know what the cost is going to be.
Satisfied? I mean,
yeah, just you know, $1.92 million in 2024 was the forecast cost.
That's for the existing zone committee structure that ECAN, and that's ECAN's costs on those existing zone committees.
I think in the old structure, correct me if I'm wrong, but we supplied the secretarial support. If you were attending on behalf of council, you're an appointed person to, you know, there would be, well, you weren't remunerated extra, but you were remunerated as part of your governance oversight sitting around this table. So there was always a cost to provide that governance oversight. Yeah, and there will be some costs involved, I'm sure, but I don't know what those are, and you've been given some insight to it. So we've got a mover that we've received the information and we've had a good discussion around that. Are you satisfied if there's any further question? Someone like to second that we receive that information? Thank you, Karen. All in agreement with that, please say aye. Aye. Those against, that's carried. Thank you. And we do expect that formal will come probably after the election. So it's going to be a lot happening after the election as well. Thank you. So that takes us through to our information items. And I know, Jace, do you reckon we try and see where we get to with 20 minutes before lunch? No pressure. No pressure. And I expect that we will have a good oversight to our financials for June 2025. And I'm happy to get partway through and then we just come back to it if that's what the questions are required. So thank you, we'll leave it with you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So this is the financial report to June. You'll see on the front in the cover sheet, page two have made lots of qualifications around the fact that although this is for 12 months, there is a truckload of work that the finance team go through before we do close off for the financial year. So there's a deficit that we've recorded there that becomes a starting point for a review of the annual report that we will do in conjunction with the Audit and Risk Committee. So there is a lot of processes that are purely year-end processes, like acknowledging or recognising vested assets, both the expenditure and the income component. We do a lot of revaluations of our interest rate swaps of this year. We're doing a revaluation of Broding. So all of those do have an effect ultimately on the final result for the financial year, and so this will change significantly as we go through the process. But so it is very much a snapshot. So we'll just go through it. And again, because it is the end of the year, I'll sort of focus on the year-end result. But if there are any items and any variances in June that you want further clarification, please sing out. So page 105 is everything together. Our total revenue that we've recorded is 63 million. Our budget was 63 million, so we're just a shade off there, but you can see that other income is up on budget by 3.5 million, and as I mentioned, the recognition of any vested assets. So we did have a budget of 2.8 million, which we haven't done that assessment. Okay, total expenditure. Listed there, we've got total operating expenditure of 68 million. Our budget for the full year was 67.6 million, so we're about $500,000 up on that amount, and by far the biggest component there is the internal interest, so that is both sits in operating expenditure, but also operating revenue. And finally, our capital expenditure that we've recorded for the 12 months is just straight over 30 million. Our budget for the full year was 43 million, but those variances will become apparent as we go through the process. Page 106 is water supplies. Two key issues in respect to revenue is the level of development contributions that we had predicted for the full year was a lot lower than what we had budgeted for, and as I mentioned, the assessment of the vested asset income needs to be done. Operating expenditure altogether is about 640,000 higher than budgeted for. Some key variances we've talked about, the electricity costs being higher than what we had budgeted for, and also insurance throughout the year, and internal interest relating to water.
So development contributions, why are we so down on
we did have a higher level of growth predicted in the budget than we had, than we actually experienced. And again, when we do the budget for the long-term plan, it is predicting out 40 years, but particularly 10 years, and then we just average it for the 10-year period. So unfortunately, growth doesn't work completely on a linear basis. It is quite cyclical, and we did have a significant amount of development or new sections in our long-term plan for Hanmer Springs that didn't come to fruition before the end of the financial year, but hopefully not very far away, because there's a significant amount of work being undertaken up there currently. So that one purely, we do like to think it's more of a timing variance. We'll obviously, when we do the next long-term plan, get a chance to recalibrate those development contributions with potentially different assumptions around growth, but this is what we adopted, this time last year when we adopted.
Have you said that? Oh, thanks, Jason.
Okay, the capital expenditure there, and I will point, and I do point on a few occasions to the capital expenditure report. Page 30 onwards, which has each individual project, the cost we've incurred to date compared to the budget, so there's a bit more detail. Otherwise, I'm just referring to the fact that that particular project is overspent or underspent accordingly. But on the face of it, we're looking at a down on expenditure, on capital expenditure, about 3.5 million for water. Page 107 is just a wrap up of the NPU stimulus and transition process, but I will point out that, and it was, completely highlighted in Claire's report earlier, that we've received 250,000 from the DIA towards the transition process that we're going through now, which was not much of a lot.
Yeah, so that was kind of my question really. Will the reflection of, our previous or our first decision item this morning, where the cost to build the Wisco and such like, will we see that on this page up to a point of change? So we'll see that and see the investment that we're going to make, or the money that we're going to put into it, and it will be tracked as an expense to the cost as we've gone through.
That's certainly my
okay.
I'll just note on that $250,000 that is for Hurunui and Kaikoura District Councils.
Yeah.
And we hold it on behalf of for the work that we're doing, George.
Yeah. But I think it'd be good to see the tracking of costs. It'll come through on this page. We're probably I wonder whether we need to retitle it almost, like it's a reflected. Yeah.
That's more of a legacy from previous bygone era. And from a transparency point of view, particularly with our very good friends to the north, that making sure that we're utilising the money for the purpose it was intended for.
Thanks, Karen.
It's just further to that. You probably intend to do this anyway, but at the moment it looks like it's like those two amounts are lumped together. The 1,112.5 and the 250. If we're doing the Kaikoura one in partnership with them, wouldn't we need to separate those out to be transparent to them as well?
Yeah, but I suppose the 250 are joint costs that we will be incurring on behalf of the two councils together. So it isn't sort of half of it split each. It's for the purpose of the whole project.
So Kaikoura have a very similar amount to our.
Yes. So I may have misunderstood this, but I thought when we were going through the process of working together with them to set up the CCO, that there might be some elements of that actually were just for us to do, that contribute to the picture, and some of it would be joined together. And I guess I'm meaning we've got 112,500. Some of it that might come down just for some Hurunui related aspects, and the rest might be joint, and I was thinking they'd need to be separated out.
That certainly is the intention. I haven't gotten to a point how I can put it down on paper correctly, but largely our costs will be largely Claire's time involved with the process, and similarly up in Kaikoura we've got one staff member assigned to the project that
so in time that information will be available in a reworded you can aim for this budget item, and it perhaps will be more fine grained what we're seeing there at the initial time.
Yeah, that's cool, thanks, Karen. Yep. I think we're all good. Yeah, move on. Thank you.
108 is sewer, and again, similar issues to water. We've got, we're down on contributions, and also the vested asset assessment is yet to be done.
So, Jason, the vested assets.
Yep.
There'll be a relationship to the contract. Well, so throughout, so every time there's a vested asset, we're at risk of our income being a lot down too, because we won't.
Absolutely, yeah, that is, so the vested assets, development's done. The water, sewer, roading, components of, and stormwater components of any subdivision, at a certain point are vested to council, and an assessment of the value of that is done. And the way we record it in double entry accounting system that we record it is purchase of assets, and the other side of it is the income. So if there is a lower level of development, we'd expect a lower level of vested assets and a lower level of income accordingly.
But just looking at those, we could be down 40% on the vested assets, which is showing in all these ones here.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. But it is purely a book entry rather than cash received or anything like that, so.
Oh, sorry, do you want to finish? Sorry, I'll cut you off.
No.
Yeah.
Very quick question on that page 108 there, the 150,000 saving on sludge management of 47,000. Is that a timing issue or is that a genuine saving?
I believe it will be a timing issue, and I will probably there are going to be a number of projects here, and sludge management are projects, even though we have to record them as operating expenditure, that we will do an assessment in late August for projects that will be carried forward.
Assessment of the vested assets, particularly all of the water, does that then feed into the setting up the CCO, or is that going to be another process again of evaluating all their assets in that?
Well, we've done a bunch of work on the basis that those assets are going to be part of our assets that we transfer to the Wisco, but if they don't eventuate, they won't be. They don't transfer across at that point. So
I think part of the work that we have to do to set up Wisco is to do a revaluation on the assets. So we have to agree a basis of revaluation so that Kaikoura and ourselves do our revaluation exactly the same. And the net assets, so the assets net of debt transferred to Wisco will be the basis of the shares. And the questions about shares in the Wisco before, so the share allocation in the Wisco. So roughly, based on current valuations of debt, we're about 60% of the net assets. Kaikoura is about 40, so that's the sort of ballpark figure. But we need to get that valuation done because our valuation methodologies differ slightly, and we need to get it done on the same basis, using the same valuer, so that we get an accurate figure for our share setup.
Thank you. Thanks, Bobby.
Right, and capital expenditure for sewer, we're down by just over $1 million, but 690 of that relates to the vested assets. Page 109 is stormwater. There again, the assessment of the vested assets, both revenue and largely in the capital expenditure line. But there are some projects there that will most likely need to be carried forward into the page 110 for cars, is group activity, and it's broken down into roading on page 111. And again, just actually this you and see in Roding, we have 1.1 million, so if there is limited amount of development, that number will be very, very small. As a snapshot for June, we're down on NZTA subsidies, but that does, did relate to that. Our budget did include receiving subsidies towards the low cost, low risk projects, which did not come to fruition.
Just Jason, or even to Dan, to congratulate the contractors on the great job they've done on the footpaths and shooting. Nice tidy job and basically top.
Right, well done, thank you, that's cool.
You could pass it on to.
Okay, yeah, and also we're down on capital expenditure, but there was a reforecasting of the expenditure after sort of understanding the impact of the reduced subsidies. What we had page 1112 is breakdown construction, and certainly in there we do have costs relating to QVet roadside construction, but there will be another amount that will be added to that if that job has been completed. If it wouldn't have been completed by the end of June, so there'll be a portion that will naturally carry over to the next financial year. Page 113 is coastal hazards, and it stands out there is obviously the purchase of land for the Amberley Beach retreat process.
Yeah,
Sorry, Tom.
No, that's okay. No, I was, it was on this page. I was just waiting my turn.
You were preempting me.
Yeah, I was just getting. I just wondered if we could a little bit of explanation of the subdivision of the land at Mottanell Beach not progressing as budgeted. Is there an issue or a problem there, or?
So the works being undertaken, but the first step is to attempt to get the reserve status lifted.
Yeah.
That is a reasonably complex process to get a reserve status lifted. So it depends on where the land is right in the first place. This is a Crown derived reserve, so DOC has to make the decision, and DOC's first reaction is just go and buy some land. So it's their first response, and so we've got to work through the process.
Thank you.
And I mean, I couldn't give you any idea of the timeline for getting through their process.
But it is still a project we want to complete, so there will be a deliberate carrying forward of that budget.
Oh, cool, Vanessa, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, further to Tom's question, that's a pretty arrogant response, Hamish, from DOC. Did they give any reasons to substantiate that kind of response?
Yeah, they said this is reserve land that's been deemed reserve, and if you want to do a subdivision, go somewhere else.
Thank you.
We'll continue to work through that, I'm sure. Jason, it's just a perception, and I was just concerned around the title Amberley Beach Retreat. And I just wonder whether we should retitle that to managed retreat.
Proactive relocation.
Proactive, beg your pardon, proactive relocation, because I just think the perception of it just doesn't sit comfortably. So,
No, and
yeah,
all the other reference to that project is Amberley Beach proactive
yeah,
relocation.
That's
So
awesome.
that is yeah, unfortunately, just
Yeah.
carry.
Yeah, no, that's
Didn't even
fine.
think of that. Sorry, when I was
No,
doing these
no,
things.
it just sort of jumped out at me, and I just think the sensitivity around that's probably better phrased in a different manner. Thank you. We'll move on.
Page 114 is group activity for public services, and that's broken down into the 6 individual activities. First one being community services, and key areas there is reported all the way through the year, and the additional income that we have received. and Ryan's assessment of that below. And again, there will be an adjustment made at the 30th of June for unspent grant funding will actually be treated as a current liability and then transfer into the next financial year. So it's just a treatment there. Any grants that we've met all the conditions of, we will record as revenue, but anything that still has work to be done, it will actually flow through into the next year.
Thanks, Jason. This might be more a question for you, I'm not sure, but I mean, fantastic that we've got a benefactor that's funding the SEED program, and I wondered if there's any sense of whether that might continue into subsequent financial year or not.
Yeah, it's a pilot for this year, and and so it will be reviewed in its entirety once the 12 months, and then there will be ongoing discussion with the individual benefactor, and it's I'll say likely, but it will depend on the outputs from their position. So yeah, it's certainly a work in progress, but the benefactor has certainly been included in the proposal. So saw the work plans and continues to be kept involved, I guess, on a maybe quarterly, if not 6 monthly basis. So yeah, but it's very kind and generous. But actually, my question was around that, because I don't think that remaining funds, 8,900, it seems to me as if that's not the right number, surely. In the seed fund here,
Yep.
got 100 grand and remaining funds, what's that number supposed to be? 8,696? Or what?
Well, that's what it says there. I can do
Yeah.
do a deeper check.
I think it's probably supposed to be 896 or 8,000, sorry, 896. No, 86,000, sorry. I just feel, it looks as if the comma's in the wrong place, that's all.
You've been running the project for this part of the year, so
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
rightio.
I would say we'd only be about a quarter of the way through the fund, so that seemed like, that number didn't seem quite right to me.
Yeah, no, I stand to be corrected. I can go and review.
Yeah,
review
okay.
that again. Make a time to do a deep dive.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Pauline and then Robbie.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure if this is a question for Jason or who. The Welcoming Communities, the funding from MB, which is coming to an end in October, are we expecting that is coming to an end, or that there'll be another chunk, or so then we'll be reliant on other grants like perhaps RATA or because I know we've got some from RATA. Okay, thank you.
Certainly as we move.
Judith, have you got a?
We've provided to continue that program in the long-term plan.
Yeah, but the
Funding it with through rates.
Yeah.
Radio, Robbie, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about the two items above that, 3 and 4, that supposedly ran out last month, and there's still some remaining funds. Does that use it or lose it, or does it roll over? It's the youth development program and the MTF.
Again, I'll do an assessment of the agreement. If we have met all the conditions of it, we don't need to refund anything. But generally we do carry it forward into the next financial year.
So Ms. Castles for Josh, we have a new contract. So the new contract for the incoming year.
So
lesser outcomes. Yeah.
Approximately.
100 and, what was their funding? 30 or something?
Yep. Yeah, but Robbie's talking about the 20K
Yeah.
remaining.
The residue.
Yeah, I think that'll be okay, to be continuing to be used, I don't think they'll retrieve it back.
On that property, key variances here is the additional funds we received from Solomon's Block and the additional cost relating to couple of items of capital expenditure there with under township maintenance, we did have funding, development contribution funding for walking and cycling routes in Amberley, which portion of that was unspent at the end of the year, but obviously carried forward into the next financial year. And demolition work, I believe, on Queen Mary South still to occur.
Jason, I know it's a nuisance for you, but I'm just conscious of the time and you need to have a break for lunch. So I think if we pause the financial report and we'll come back after the PE item at 1 o'clock. And we'll continue on page 117, which is the reserve. So Vanessa, did you get that? We'll take a lunch break now. We'll be back at 1 o'clock. Can I just ask to go into public excluded? Thank you, Karen. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Fiona, that when we come back at 1 o'clock, we will be in public excluded session. And the reasons for that have been identified in your PE agenda. And we'll work through that paper. So, okay, you guys move and see all in favour, please say aye. Aye. Yes, that's carried. Thank you. It's 117.
Right, thank you, Bob.
Jason left us, is that right? Yep.
You'll probably tell us he was at 100. Yeah.
He's gonna drill it into us.
Oh no, this one marked the stop. They're trying to get away with it.
117, we're all, Vanessa's back, we're all good to go.
Right,
Yep.
page 117, reserves, key areas, the revenue is up on budget mainly due to there being positive internal funds amounts, receiving additional internal interest. The operating expenditure, the key variance there was 152,000 spent on the Anzac Memorial in Culverden, which has been itemised as an operating expense. And then under capital expenditure, the key variance is just the work done for the ward and township reserves in Amberley, not quite done to the level that we had budgeted for. So again, there'll be an item there of funds to carry forward, those projects from the DC funds. Page 118 is emergency services, and just a couple of variances sitting in there in respect to the satellite broadband system. Will be implemented later than we had budgeted for. And there's an underspend there in these various capital projects that we had allowed for in the budget that had been unspent at year end. And again, we'll get Alan and analysis of what projects need to be carried forward into the
So just an update on that satellite system. We've been waiting on NEMA to sign an agreement with Starlink for the use of Starlink situations, and the agreement was finally signed last week. So we will now move ahead with that. The capital cost of Starlink equipment is not much different to what you're paying out in the market, but the plan costs are cheaper, and we can do plans on and off at will, and also using the NEMA system will get priority traffic in an emergency. So if there's too many people on the Starlink, other people get booted off, and Starlink will still be connected. So it's quite a good deal.
Cool. Thanks, Jason.
Page 119 is the library. Key variances here sit within development contributions, because we are collecting contributions for the expansion of the library. And like in the three waters, the amount of development was lower than what we had predicted. Couple of operating expenditure items down on budget, and capital expenditure. I haven't highlighted the number there, but there was some roofing work budgeted to be done on the library that had remained largely unspent by the end of the
So Jason, Vanessa, you've got a question?
Thank you through the chair, Jason. The 65 grand for the roofing obviously is included in that $116,000 budget. What other capex were planned for the year for the library?
Generally, we have about $70,000 worth of book purchases.
Okay.
And
It's obvious.
there was a few pieces of furniture and stuff for that were allowed for as well. So, but again, we'll do an assessment whether there is any portion of that cost that needs to be carried forward into the next.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks, Jason.
Okay, page 120 is waste minimisation. For the year, the transfer station charge is significantly up on budget. And again, development contributions are lower. Operating expenditure at this stage is relatively on par with the long-term plan or with the budget. But the capital expenditure, now bearing in mind we did have in the budget work on the transfer station in Cheviot that hasn't progressed. That particular item was 700,000, so results in a significant amount of that underspend. Page 21 is regulatory services and broken down into 122 planning. And some key variances there in the external costs and the internal costs relating to resource management and 123 is compliance and other regulatory functions. So this includes building control, and yeah, at the end of the financial year, we have pretty much hit budget, the full budget for the year. As far as building control income and our expenditure line, we did have additional expenditure relating to insurance, and we've got to process the consents.
Okay, so now I've just got a question coming from Ross.
Yes, going through the chair, Jason, quick question just regarding resource consents and actually consents in general. Do we picture that going forward, the use of AI will reduce our costs in consent applications? Because the reality is, with any consent, it's the information's out there in the big wide world. Somebody's already done a report on. So, do we see potential savings going forward in that area? I mean, I do, and I'm probably the least one to talk about AI, but I could see it as being that the information's out there, and AI can put it all together in 2 minutes. Consent's done.
No, I can't answer that.
So Northern Regional Council, I think it is one of the Northern Councils has developed some use of AI in its resource consent evaluation processes, and sort of keep you a bit of an eye on what's happening there. It's potentially working. I think that building consenting, which is very prescriptive, is something where AI can be utilised to a larger degree, and probably Datacom, who has moved from working on AI, and that's an area that they're interested in. So yet utilising AI in building consenting, but I think it's an area that's really significant advantage to the development of AI to do this sort of thing. And I'm talking about it doing the routine stuff, so that the processing officers will begin to focus on the non-routine parts of the job. So yeah, I think it's got definite uses in the area, but yeah, it's whether somebody's prepared to put the effort into develop a system nationally, or one of the software systems develops that rather than the individual council developing it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ross. Thanks, Jason.
Okay, page 124 is the thermal pools, and as Sarah mentioned before, our surplus to the 1 million, still 385 or 387,000 lower than what we had budgeted for the year. But bear in mind, when we set the annual plan, we did forecast it would be about $500,000 lower than budget. So it's sort of come back a bit from the original pessimistic view. And key variance here, obviously, in capital expenditure to date, it's just a shade over 900,000 spent of a full budget of 5.5 million. So, and again, big 5.5 million included the flow ride, and the full breakdown is on page 133.
Thanks for your question.
Oh, sorry.
No.
There's just your pen sitting like this.
You just bought it, buddy.
Got free with his new tyres.
I'm not Ross.
Sorry, I just, have a habit of missing people today, so I was all over it. Sorry.
Page 125 is group activity for governance and corporate, broken down for governance on page 126. And overall, huge significance and significant variances from budget. Page 127 is the treasury account, and at the end of the year, the treasury account recorded a surplus of 500,000, and it's been generated by the internal interest being higher than what we expected. The external interest is pretty close to what we had budgeted, and other income does include penalties, rate penalties being over budget by about 20,000. We've received about 200,000 of external interest, where we put money on just on the call account when we got spare cash, and it's generated a bit of interest over the journey. And then we also received a unbudgeted dividend from Transwaste in June of 56,000.
What is the,
I'm sorry.
what is the BRR?
The Burwood Recovery
Oh,
Project.
the
Resource Recovery. Corporate services on page 128, there's a variance there. We have underspent on vehicles for the year, but we've overspent. We have progressed the Datascape ERP project ahead of what we. And the final page is 129 is the earthquake recovery, just where it's currently sitting for the year. So,
yep, thank you.
Coupled with that, as I mentioned before, page 130 to 134, the breakdown of the capital expenditure into the individual projects, and hopefully be able to see the key projects, and this will be used a bit of a basis for understanding any unspent projects or any funds that will need to be carried forward.
And that a paper will come for unspent funds for it to be carried forward, so that councillors can check to see whether that's the right passageway. So that'll happen inside of this triennium.
Yeah, we normally do that in August.
Yeah, okay.
And try and pick up all those projects. So I'll be putting something up too. Once we've got confidence that this is the final, because there are, unfortunately, there is still invoices that flow through that relate to projects in the previous financial year. We should have the vast bulk of them now, but they do dribble in. Suppliers sometimes don't want to be paid in a hurry, but that's their problem. So hopefully at the August meeting we'll have that.
So it'd be good for councillors to kind of just look out for that paper to see whether the projects that are sitting in that are still going to be, that funding needs to be carried forward into the new financial year. So if you look for that for next meeting, that might be helpful to come with that info.
Certainly try and get an indication from the individual community committees as well, because there is a lot more detailed interest in some of the projects for those committees, just making sure that they do flow through.
Cool.
The next component of the report is the rate arrears report. Analysis there on page 103. Total rates owing at the end of June. I think I mentioned in the minutes from last month that I was hopeful that we'd be under $1 million. We're not quite there, but it is certainly still lower than when we were the previous financial year.
Thanks, Robbie.
It's also worth noting that all of those figures down there compared to June last year are on the right side of that. We know all about cost of living, everything else, and feeding through the nation at the moment, so that's almost surprising, but that's good.
Yep, we did have a little bit of, we've got some real, kind of rather hardcore overdue ratepayers, which we finally worked through a process with our debt management company, A&E Plan, to be able to initiate legal proceedings against those. So, hopefully, short space of time that
I mean, I guess it's quite telling that that's what I noted on page 103 in your report, you know, the rate arrears and the number and the significant amount of those ratepayers, you know, it's not insignificant, those tellings, is it really, you know, so it's a lot of money that the rest of the ratepayers are actually covering for, actually, we, you know, and it's something we need to continue to focus on as best we can. Yeah, that was quite telling to me in that report. Thank you.
Right, and the last component of the financial report is the treasury component. The treasury dashboard is provided on page 138 and 139. Just points to note that at the end of June, our external debt sat at 87 million. 73 million of that was in term loans and another 14 in short-term debt. Our liquidity ratio was fine at the end of the year, and our weighted average cost of funds had reduced down to 4.21% at the end of June. But for the first time for a little while, we're within compliance with all of our limits, and that was the need to do some key interest rate swaps at the end of during June. So us to that position, so it was always make sure we're fully compliant by the end of the financial year. So page 141 is the list of debt that we have. You'll note that there's in the short-term debt, there's 4 million there that we took out to meet the settlement of the Ashworth Road block, and it does have the maturity date of the 20th of August, and I'm working through a process to be able to apply for the green, social and sustainable loans that the LGFA offer, which does come at a cheaper interest cost because of the mere reason we bought that piece of land was to proactive relocation. So it does fit a lot of the criteria that the LGFA are looking at.
How much cheaper is that interest?
It's 5 basis points, or 0.05%, but it is everything.
Yeah.
Does make a difference. And the other key component is because this the end of the June quarter, we reset our internal interest rates. So top page 104, the weighted average cost of funds sits at 4.21%. The internal interest charge drops to 5.21% for communities that hold debt, and 6.21% for thermal pools, and that's down 0.08% from the previous quarter, and the term deposit rate has dropped as well. So those communities that hold funds will receive slightly less in interest. And the final component of the financial, the treasury report is just the analysis of the internal debt. on pages 144 to 158. And again, I do focus on the big ticket items, which all here on page 146. You'll see there that the internal debt thermal pools had dropped just over $1 million over the year, so they have made debt repayments of 3.6 million, and within that we've charged the interest and the dividend, the net dividend. So, but on top of that, there's been a further $1 million of debt repayment. And the position where we are with water, sewer and stormwater sit at 51.5, 11.8 and 4.1 respectively. And those are the numbers that will transfer into the WISCO when we
Thank you, Jason. Is there any further questions for Jason in regard to the financial report for June 25? I'll walk those through as we've gone. So thank you, Jason. Apologies for breaking it up into two segments, but thank you. With that in mind, is someone willing to receive that information? Fiona? Thank you, Ross. All in agreement if we receive that, please say aye. Aye. Against, that motion's carried. Thank you. Thanks, councillors. So our next paper in front of us on page 149 is the Laboima request. Graham, this was your paper, and there are a few more there today, which is interesting. Perhaps you could just give us a bit of an oversight and then we'll see where the questions lie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think I have any updates. We've got a few in progress there. Just been worked on. So yeah, I don't have any to highlight in the news. Happy to take questions.
Any questions from councillors? I'm curious about number 12. Is there any flavour around that one?
Well, Madam Mayor, I think you were a couple of that, just a range of questions following on from the deputation.
Right.
I can.
Yeah, right, okay. That's cool. And what about number 14? The beach. What's the reduction there?
It's a resident at the beach.
Right. Just curious about process or?
Curious about costs.
Right, okay. So we'll be able to supply all that information.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Vanessa's hand up. Vanessa?
Through the chair, Graham, number 8, are you able to allude as to which reserve you're talking about, the request is based on?
It related to a reserve in Glenmark area, I think.
Sorry, say that again?
It was a reserve in the Glenmark area, I think, and it was around, there was some work done on a tree. I think it was concrete around the tree.
Oh, I know what that one is.
Thank you. A question about how that happened in the process, who has the delegation on that reserve, etc.
Thank you.
Yeah, we think it's been resolved.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Is it, oh, Robbie, sorry.
Number 4, is that around tiny homes or?
No.
It's not, okay.
Any other questions? Someone happy to move, receive this information? Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Tom. All in agreement, please say aye. Aye. There we go. Thanks, Carrie. We'll receive that information. We have our monthly performance report in the paper, so we're getting pretty good at reading these.
Yeah, so we look at the second one, with June ones, you'll see the recycling to waste ratio once again, didn't meet target for the month, 28% against target 31. So relatively flat recycling volumes and glass and green waste down. It's amazing. There, and everything else for the month was compliant. So it leaves us with a few that are not compliant for the year, but overall not too bad.
Any questions from councillors? That being the case, is someone happy to move that we receive that information? Fiona, as a seconder. That's fine. All of you, please say aye. Thanks, that's carried, thank you. And now we have committee updates, and Karen, if you just want to take us through the tourism board, that'd be appreciated.
Sure. So, just a couple of items here. The Destination Management Plan Advisory Group has had its first meeting, and we're actually due the tourism board to meet again next week, and we'll be meeting with the chairperson, Darren Charity, at that time to, I guess, talk with him and meet with him, which will be really good. So that the advisory group is intended to, I guess, support the implementation of the destination management activity. Whereas obviously the board will continue to retain governance over the whole of Hiranui tourism, including the rollout of that plan. The community survey, you may have seen through the governance advisory here, probably put out to all community committees or boards, trying to seek support for that community survey. And so the idea is that the community is being asked about their kind of attitudes and thoughts around the level of tourism and the type of tourism and so on, or visitation in their area, and what their views might be about that. And the data collected from that will serve as a baseline that can then be compared to future repeats of the survey with the same questions in years to come. And this is, if you kind of see this in the context of trying to make sure that we in Hiranui are never in the position of having over tourism where people get actually really annoyed with tourists and don't want them in a, react against the level of tourism or that sort of thing. I don't think there's really been much of that in our district, but the Destination Management Plan certainly puts an onus on us as a board to make sure that we're getting that balance right, and that partly involves getting feedback from the local communities around that. And so it'll be really interesting to just have a look at the results of that survey. I'm not sure if they'll be available to us next week for our meeting or not, but that will give us some good clues, I think. You'll also see there that we've been working with Amberley NZ, the officers have looking at, I guess, thinking about State Highway 1 in particular as being, trying to make it into a sticky kind of track to get people to stop, give them a reason to stop and maybe spend some money in our district. As you'll be aware, there's huge number of vehicle movements on that road. And so this was one of the projects that came out of Anton Wilkie's work, where he said a lot of tourism activities probably had more focus in the Hannah Springs area for this district, but actually don't forget about State Highway 1. So they've decided to focus initially on Amberley. They're working really actively with Amberley NZ. So this will also feed into and be related to the spatial planning and so on as well, like trying to create an environment where people will want to stop. So that activity will continue, obviously, in conjunction with local efforts. And the thought is that maybe something similar could be considered in Cheviot in due course. And there are lots of new retail, activity and so on there, which are probably helping to contribute to that reason for people to stop anyway. But just being more mindful and thinking about ways that we might attract people to stay. Actually, I'll just leave it there, but I'm happy to take any questions from people.
Thanks for that, it was a really good wind up. Thanks, Karen. Is there any questions for Karen in regard to the tourism board update? Thank you, Karen. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Vince. All in agreement to that, please say aye.
Aye.
That's carried, thank you. Robbie, I'll come to you in regard to the operations committee, please.
Yes, you can take it as read, but I'll just point out some of the main points. Melbourne Township voted to upgrade their firefighting capacity as a high school, among other things in the town, so that was a good decision. Three Waters, some naughty little rodents got into our new pump station at Ernui 1 and caused some problems there, but that's been dealt with. Kaiwara Road, you may remember that that came to light with traffic diversions being sent through it, and it was in a bit of a state. So some work's been done on that, and plans to put some more gravel on that at a later date. Mendip Bridge suffered flooding damage, and I don't know, Dan, is there any update on Mendip Bridge at the moment?
I don't know, Madam Mayor, I think we're waiting on the design from WSP.
So that's still remaining closed at the moment.
Yeah.
Building consent was interesting, private people coming into the arena. One concern is that they can pick the low fruit and perhaps pick building consents for blocks of houses that are similar, new house builds, and leave all the awkward ones for council. And discussion was, well, if these private guys did fold or whatever at some stage, does it fall back on us? So there's a bit of a watching brief there. A really good news story, the Wheeled Excavator program has been achieving more than what was thought, and it's been to say there's been nothing but good reports coming back around that work, just generally working around the network. So that's been a success. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Robbie, that's really good. Is there any questions for Robbie in regard to the operations committee? Robbie's happy to move it. We received that information. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Ross. All in agreement to that, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, that's carried, thank you. Audit and risk, Fiona.
Oh, look, probably take it as read. This was when I think prior to the auditors coming through to council, we've had a conversation with them, haven't we? Council? No, we haven't yet, right? Sign off on it. We had a look at the final reports to council for the 2024 long-term plan annual report. Had some discussions and noted there'd been no change to the draft report that council was tabled at 15th of April meeting. We've addressed some of the council action points, and we also discussion was held on the effect of the change of the ERP system on the action points, which has resulted in a huge amount of work on top of normal business. So there's it's just so much work going on in the background at the moment. We noted that the health and safety report from the falls and that the insurance policies agreed to prior to next year's renewals, officers will look at the service levels of different brokers, given the displacement of the water surfaces for best deals. So we'll be looking at reshaping. So, well, as we reshape, we just need to make sure that we are insuring ourselves correctly. Best deal.
Thanks, Fiona. Is there any questions for Fiona through the Audit and Risk Committee? Are you giving a move? Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Karen. All in agreement, we received that information. Please say aye.
Aye.
Against, that's carried. Thank you. Pauline, we have the Strategy and Community Committee update. And there's some highlights from there.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Pretty much I can take that as read, but pleased to see the amazing work that Vanessa's done with her steering group following the age-friendly survey. We now have an action plan in place, so that's pretty exciting, and she's really passionate about her work there. We're working on the submission for the national directions on the RMA, and Andrew's taken us through that, and we've been doing a little bit of work on email. And we, via email rather, not on email, looked at the forward work program in a new format, and there is a lot on the program. And then we had a workshop in regards to South West Glacial planning, specifically Amberley Town Centre, and had a bit of a discussion about, you know, where we felt that might go in the future, and Andrew's gone off to do some more work on that. So happy to take any questions, otherwise happy to move.
Thank you, Pauline. Is there any questions?
Oh, just a question on the currently age-friendly action plan. What are the key points of it?
I'll send it to you,
I
but
just wanted
it's
to-
based around the World Health Organization 7 areas. So it would be far too much for me to reel them all off to you, so I'll send it through. But it's been really, really well informed by the survey results, so that it felt to the committee that we were really targeting the needs of our actual communities that we heard. So
Do you think it's achievable?
I do think it's achievable, yes. And we talked in depth, and I mean the expertise that the steering group has put forth for that has been invaluable, really. Yeah. And it'll be a moving feast, I would hope, as it should be, as you know, the district, as it evolves and changes, and you know, our constituents' needs change. Yeah, based around the World Health Organization 7 aspects. So I'll flick it to you then.
Oh, thanks, Pauline. Thanks for that question. Do you want to move? You have a second? Yeah, okay, so we're going to move in a second that we received the information all in agreement with the aye. Right. Against, that's carried, thank you. The Youth Council, we went there, but Robbie, you were present at that meeting. Do you want to do anything? It's probably pretty well spelled out in the report. Yeah.
And then to feedback around the seed program, though, around Maddie was one of the with the schools was very well received. Yeah, they sort of walk through what happens when you go to big school or high school and how to manage timetables and everything else. So I think the group's done good work.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that was the meeting at the year 7 and 8, so it gathered all the kids from year 7 and 8, so then they're led by the youth council or that age group, say what's it like when you go into a big school and you
Can I just comment on that, because I actually had the privilege of attending that with some of my year 7, 8 students, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. Facilitated, you know, at a high level by our youth coordinators, but our youth counsellors and our youth program young people, they have the ability to really melt away all those concerns that our young intermediate students had about high school, and they formed rapport and relationships, and then headed off on a camp, which was the second of 3 tranches. And I honestly can't thank and rate that programming enough. It's just phenomenal for small rural schools, you know, where a movement to even a rural high school is a huge deal. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. Those young people.
Oh, thanks, Pauline. Good comments for us all to hear the value in the outputs, really. So I'm happy to move that we receive that information. Do I have a second? Robbie, thank you. All in agreement to that, please say aye. Against, that's carried. We will take the Hammer Springs Thermal Pools and Farm Management Committee update as read, unless there's any questions from the council. Someone happy to move then that we receive that information as read? Thank you, Tom. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Karen. All in agreement with that, please say aye. That motion is carried. Thank you. Councillors, I think that brings us to conclusion for our council agenda, open agenda. We do have the restricted circulation report on 8.7. So sorry. And if I can ask someone to move us back into public excluded, please. No, I think you can say, I mean, this has been through councillors and, oh, look, I'm happy to have you go and then I'll have a discussion and then come back. Are you happy to stay in 10 minutes? Mover and a seconder, sorry, I got too many people. Yeah, mover and a seconder, all in agreement, please say aye. Aye. It's carried, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. Vanessa, you're up to speed with what we were at now. Thank you.